Section 1. Creatures of the Ancient Sky. Snow whales, sleeping giants, and things that should not be. Welcome back, cozy nights. Lower whatever it is you are carrying. Set it down. Slow your breathing. You are here now, and that is enough. Tonight, we go deep. Not into a dungeon, not into a war, but into something quieter and stranger than either of those things. We are going to let Skyrim wash over you, not as a game you have played, but as a world that existed long before the Dragonborn ever opened their eyes on that wagon heading toward Helgen. A world with its own logic, its own tragedies, its own impossible wonders, hiding in the margins of history. Tonight, that world comes to you like a fire at the end of a long day of walking. You do not have to do anything. You only have to listen. We are going to move through 160 facts, stories, and pieces of lore, and we are going to take our time with every single one of them. Some of these will be things you have heard before, seen differently. Some will be things that have never found their way into your late nights until right now. All of them are true, in the way that things in Skyrim are true, which is to say, deeply, strangely, and sometimes in more than one way at once. Let us start at the very beginning, before anything else. Before the Dragonborn. Before the Greybeards. Before even the language that dragons use to set the world on fire. Let us start with snow, and the creatures that swam through it like it was an ocean. Fact 1. Deep inside the Dwemer ruin of Kagrenzel, near Riften, there is a place where the floor gives way and you fall through a trapdoor into darkness. And as you fall, if you look at the cavern walls rushing past you, you will see something embedded in the stone that does not make immediate sense. Massive bones. Bones larger than any mammoth, larger than any bear or giant or creature you have encountered on the surface. Ribs. Enormous ribs, curved into the rock as though something was swallowed by the mountain itself and never came back out. The Dwemer language gives us a clue. Kagrenzel translates, in their architectural tongue, to something close to Music City. Not a fortress, not a mine, a city of music. And that clue opens a door into something stranger than stone. Nordic folklore, the really old kind, the kind that predates the written sagas and lives only in oral tradition and half-forgotten stories scratched into cave walls, tells of creatures called snow whales. These were not ocean whales. These were something else entirely. They lived at the peaks of the highest mountains, jumping from summit to summit across the cloud line, existing in that space where the air thins to almost nothing and the sky goes from blue to black. They sang, according to these stories. They produced sound in a register that human ears could barely perceive, but that the body felt, in the chest, in the teeth, in that hollow place behind the sternum. The stories call this sound the joy snow, which is one of the most beautiful phrases in all of Tamrielic folklore, and they describe it as the whales spreading their song in triumph across the high world. The scholar Michael Kirkbride, one of the architects of the early lore, wrote about these creatures and placed them specifically within the context of Skyrim's prehistory. Snow whales in the skies above the mountain ranges, Nords hunting them with ropes and hooked spears, their best climbers braving ice sheets and vertical rock to bring one down. The blubber, the meat, the fluids that could be rendered into paint and rosewater. And then, gradually, a ceasing of the hunt, because something about the joy snow became too powerful to ignore. A sound that stopped the hunters in their tracks and left them standing with ropes in their hands and tears on their faces, unable to raise a weapon. The bones in Kagrenzel fit nothing alive on the surface of Skyrim today. They are the right size, the right shape, the right archaic strangeness to be exactly what Nordic legend describes. And the Dwemer, who understood that reality is vibration and sound before it is anything else, who built cities around tonal architecture and spent their entire civilization chasing the resonant frequency that would let them become gods, the Dwemer would have been fascinated by creatures whose primary nature was pure harmonics. They might have studied them. They might have used them. The rumbling that shakes Kagrenzel's foundations when you pass through it might be the oldest sound in Skyrim, the echo of tonal experiments performed thousands of years ago on beings who sang to the sky and were brought underground to serve a civilization that never learned when to stop. This is a mystery that Skyrim leaves unresolved on purpose. The bones have no name tag. No book explains them definitively. They just exist, pressed into rock, enormous and quiet and impossible, waiting for someone who falls far enough to notice them. Fact 2. The companions trace their origins not to Skyrim, but to Atmora, the frozen continent north of Tamriel. When Ysgramor and his 500 companions sailed south after the Night of Tears, they brought the tradition with them across open water. The organization is thousands of years old, predating not just Skyrim's current civilization, but the concept of Nordic culture as it exists in the Fourth Era. The Isolde, the overturned boat that serves as the companions' mead hall in Whiterun, is not a symbolic ship. It is, according to lore, the actual vessel that carried some of the first humans to Skyrim's shores. They dragged it inland and built their hall around it. The boat became a building. The journey became a home. Every time a companion sits down to eat in that space, they are sitting inside an act of crossing, inside the moment when Skyrim was not yet a home and everything was still uncertain. That particular piece of cargo turned monument makes the companions arguably the oldest continuously operating organization in all of Tamriel. Fact 3. Giants, as a species, do not attack without provocation. This is worth sitting with, because the game conditions you early to see them as obstacles, as sources of loot, as things that will send you spinning into the sky if you wander too close to their fire. But if you pull back and observe, if you stand far enough away that your presence registers as neutral rather than threatening, giants simply carry on. They tend their mammoth herds. They follow migration routes that have been passed down through generations of giant culture. They paint their camps with astronomical symbols and rudimentary art that suggests cognitive complexity far beyond what their silence implies. There is a giant near Broken Tower Redoubt who stands over the body of a dead mammoth, not attacking, not raging, just present. He is mourning. If you return days later, he is still there, or has returned, circling the place where his companion died. No quest markers, no reward, just one being standing in grief over the loss of something it loved. In a game world that so often treats grief as a puzzle to be solved, you can walk away from that giant and leave him to it. That choice, to leave a thing alone in its sorrow, is one of the quietest moral decisions Skyrim offers you. Fact 4. The Argonian people do not simply worship the Hist trees. They require them on a biological level that has no parallel in any other race. Argonian eggs will not hatch without access to the sap of a Hist tree. Argonian young do not develop properly, do not even develop the reproductive organs necessary for their species to continue, without having licked sap from a Hist tree at a certain stage of their early life. This means that every Argonian alive is, in a biological sense, already in relationship with these ancient trees before they have formed a single conscious thought. The Hist communicate with Argonians through dreams and visions, through chemical signals in the sap that carry meaning the way language does. Some scholars believe the Hist predate most life on Tamriel, that they existed before the current form of the world solidified, that they remember ages no other living thing can reach. When the Hist sense threat, they can recall Argonians en masse, pulling them back to Black Marsh through a compulsion that overrides individual will. During the Oblivion Crisis, the Hist called their people home before the Daedric invasion reached Argonia in full force, and then sent them out again in time, Argonians carrying something of the Hist within them, almost impossible to kill, impossible to break. Shadow Scales, Argonians born under the sign of the Shadow, are given to the Dark Brotherhood at birth by Argonian tradition. Not as a punishment, as an honor, the night walking, the quiet work of death, these fit naturally into a culture that understands the void as something not to be feared, but to be inhabited. If you are listening to this late at night or early in the morning when the light has not quite found the windows yet, drop a comment wherever you are watching from. Tell me the time and the place and what you were doing when you pressed play. And if this kind of content helps you settle into quiet, subscribe so you never have to go looking for it again. Fact 5. There is a ghostly horseman who appears in Skyrim only at night. He rides without a head, moving silently across roads and fields, always heading in the same direction. He does not interact with you. He does not speak. He cannot be fought or reasoned with. He is simply there, passing through the dark, on a route he has been following for longer than anyone can remember. If you follow him, he leads you to Hamvir's Rest, a small Nordic burial ground on a hill, and then he disappears. The game offers no explanation. There is no journal entry, no quest, no NPC who will tell you what you just witnessed. The horseman simply is, a piece of atmosphere that exists only to remind you that Skyrim is a world where death does not always end things, where the restless and the incomplete walk alongside the living without anyone making a formal arrangement about it. Fact 6. The Companion's founding is, depending on which piece of lore you follow, genuinely dark. Ysgramor did not bring his 500 to Skyrim as settlers in the hopeful sense of the word. He brought them as a retribution force. The Night of Tears was the massacre of Sarthal, the earliest major Nordic settlement, attacked and largely destroyed by snow elves who were after something buried beneath the city, something we will come back to in detail later in this script. Ysgramor lost nearly everyone. He went back to Atmara, spent time in grief and fury, and returned with 500 companions whose purpose was elimination. The early companions were a genocide force. Their goal was the complete and permanent removal of snow elf civilization from Skyrim. They succeeded, mostly, with results that cascaded for thousands of years in directions no one intended and everyone suffered for. The modern companions in Whiterun, taking contracts, training fighters, maintaining an honorable neutrality in political conflicts, represent an organization that has spent millennia evolving away from its original purpose. The transformation from Extinction Campaign to mercenary guild dedicated to personal honor is not a small thing. It is the whole arc of that institution's existence, carried forward in traditions and oaths whose full original context has been lost but whose weight remains. Fact 7. Every dragon that the Dragonborn encounters at a burial mound is being resurrected by Alduin in real time. The dragon was not simply waiting in its grave until you showed up. Alduin was systematically moving through Skyrim, stopping at burial mounds and bringing his fallen soldiers back to the world one by one. The confrontations at dragon burial mounds are, in this sense, an interruption of a military operation. And every soul you absorb from a slain dragon ensures that Alduin cannot resurrect that particular dragon again, because the soul is gone. The systematic nature of the campaign matters. The Dragonborn is not just surviving encounters, they are preventing the full reassembly of an ancient army, and the race is real. If you left Alduin to it long enough, there would be a fully reconstituted draconic military in Skyrim, and the result of that would be a world that does not survive the era. Fact 8. The Greybeards hold lectures at Skyrim's College of Winterhold. Wait, let me restate that. The Masters of the College of Winterhold hold lectures between 1 in the afternoon and 3 in the afternoon each day. This is not flavor text. These are scheduled events written into the game's behavioral systems. If a dragon attacks the college while a lecture is scheduled, the lecture is canceled. 24 hours later, it resumes on schedule. The students are not simply standing around waiting for the Dragonborn to show up. They have classes. They have research. They have routines. The college functions as a living institution in the game's simulation, not merely as a location for quests to happen inside. Most players never notice any of this. Fact 9. Skyrim contains 337 readable books. Together, those books contain approximately 316,000 words of in-game text. For context, the first Lord of the Rings novel, The Fellowship of the Ring, contains roughly 177,000 words. The entirety of Tolkien's 3-volume Lord of the Rings trilogy clocks in at about 576,000 words. Skyrim's in-game library represents more than half of that complete opus. Bethesda hired actual writers to produce this material, not placeholder text, but genuine fictional histories, religious texts, personal journals, scholarly treatises, plays, and what can only be described as the ancient world's equivalent of genre fiction. Players could, theoretically, spend their entire time in Skyrim reading and never engage in a single fight. The history is there in written form, not in developer notes or a wiki. In actual books, you can pick up and read sitting by a fire in a cold Nordic inn while it snows outside. Fact 10. The sleeping tree near Whiterun is not a tree, it is an alien organism. Investigation of the site reveals organic material that does not match anything else in Skyrim's ecology. The sap it produces is a powerful narcotic, the primary ingredient in the drug skooma. A Khajiit merchant named Urag camps near the location and has an unusual arrangement with the giant who tends the site. Specifically, he pays the giant a monthly fee for exclusive access to the sap. The Khajiit caravans in general operate as intelligence networks for elsewhere, as we will discuss in detail later, But this particular merchant represents a fascinating subset of that operation: pharmaceutical exploitation of an entity of genuinely unknown origin. Where did the sleeping tree come from? The most credible theory in fan communities, backed by in-game evidence, is that it fell from the sky, a seed or organism from somewhere else entirely, crashing into Tamriel long before recorded history, taking root and quietly producing chemicals that nobody on this world evolved to process safely. The giant who tends it does not produce skooma. The giant is just there, in the way that giants tend animals in places they have developed relationships with. There is a kind of poignant detail in that image, a giant sitting guard over something it does not fully understand, in the shadow of something that is not from here, in a world that contains far more strangeness than its surface suggests. Section 2. The Dwemer. Engineers of impossible things. Pull whatever you have around you a little closer. Let the light settle. We are going into the deep places now, not literally underground, although we will get there, but into the history of the most fascinating and most tragic civilization Tamriel ever produced. The Dwemer. In other sources, the dwarves, though that name was given to them by outsiders who did not understand what they were. They were not short, stocky treasure hoarders from a Norse myth analog. They were deep elves, philosophers, engineers, a civilization that looked at the universe and decided that if divinity was real, it was a technical problem to be solved, not a mystery to be revered. Fact 11. Dwemer engineering was not based on conventional mechanics. The proper term for what they did is tonal architecture. The Dwemer understood, at a level that no other civilization in Tamriel ever reached, that existence itself is fundamentally vibrational. Reality is made of resonance. And if you discover the right frequencies, if you find the tonal signature of a given material, a given space, a given principle, you can reshape it. You can make it do what you want without touching it in any conventional sense. This is why Dwemer machinery still functions thousands of years after they vanished. Their automatons, the spheres, the spiders, the centurions, do not appear to have conventional power sources. They do not run on coal or oil, or even magic in the way other devices do. They run on tonal manipulation of reality itself. Their metal is not typical metal. It does not corrode. It does not fatigue. It operates on principles that Fourth-era scholars have studied for generations and still cannot replicate. Dwarven metal can defeat time and decay, as one text puts it, because it was engineered to resonate at a frequency that the processes of entropy cannot find purchase on. The Thuum, the dragon shout, the voice that the dragonborn wields, this is a related phenomenon, mortals using vocalization to reshape reality. The Dwemer may have spent their entire civilization trying to achieve through calculation and engineering what dragons do instinctively through speech. They were trying to steal the frequency of divinity and apply it without needing to be divine. Fact 12. Kagranach was the Dwemer's chief tonal architect, their greatest engineer and their most dangerous dreamer. He built Numidium, also known as the Brass God, a mechanical colossus powered by the Heart of Lorkhan. The Heart of Lorkhan is one of the most significant objects in all of Tamrielic cosmology, and we will discuss Lorkhan himself in more detail in the section on creation and cosmic architecture. But, briefly, Lorkhan was a deity, one of the original spirits, who convinced other divine beings to help create the mortal world. That act consumed most of their divinity and left the world as a kind of prison for godhood they could no longer claim. Lorkhan was punished for it. His heart was torn out and cast away. It landed somewhere that would eventually become Red Mountain in Morrowind, and the power it contained was so immense that the land around it became the site of every civilization that ever tried to use it. Kagranach found the heart. He built tools, Wraithguard, Keening, and Sunder, that could interface with it. His book, Divine Metaphysics, describes the creation of gods through pure engineering, treating divinity as a theorem to be solved rather than a state of grace to be received. His goal was to attach the entire Dwemer race to the heart's power, to elevate them collectively into something that transcended mortality, something that could not be killed or diminished or lost. At the Battle of Red Mountain in 1E700, he struck the heart with his tools. Every Dwemer alive anywhere on Tamriel at that exact moment vanished, not one by one, not gradually, simultaneously. In every Dwemer city on the continent, In every ruin and outpost and workshop, bodies simply ceased to exist. Clothes and armor fell to the ground. Machinery continued operating. The food on the tables did not spoil for some time because it was a warm day, and food does not know what has happened to the people who cooked it. Fact. 13. Only one Dwemer survived, Yagrum Bagarn. He survived because he was not on Tamriel when it happened. He was in Oblivion, one of the planes of Daedric reality, traveling through what the Dwemer called the Outer Realms in pursuit of knowledge that could not be found at home. He came back to find his entire species gone, every family member, every friend, every stranger who had ever annoyed him in a crowded corridor, every Dwemer who had ever lived. He found ruins. He found machines still working. He found empty chairs. Yagrum Bagarn appears in Morrowind, old beyond reckoning, afflicted with corpus disease, unable to leave the care of the Telvanni wizard Devaith Fear. He is the last. He is the entirety of Dwemer biological knowledge, walking history, the last archive of a civilization that tried to become gods and became nothing instead. Or something. Because the other question, did they succeed in some sense nobody intended? Did the process work and scatter them across time, or dissolve them into something collective and incomprehensible? That question does not have an answer. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Facte 14. Ariel Ga, a researcher at the College of Winterhold, became so consumed by the question of what happened to the Dwemer that he obtained Keening, one of Kagranak's actual tools, and attempted to replicate the circumstances of their disappearance on a smaller scale. He used a soul gem in place of the heart of Lorcan. He performed the ritual. He vanished instantly, without a trace. His shade sometimes appears in the ruins of Mazulft to assist the Dragonborn, suggesting he exists in a liminal state, present in some sense, but not here in the way the living are here. His experiment proved that Kagranak's tools were indeed the direct cause of the Dwemer's extinction. It also meant that he himself became a casualty of his own intellectual curiosity, which is perhaps the most academic way to die that the Elder Scrolls universe has ever produced. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. This is not a saying that scholars generally find convincing until it is too late. Fact. 15. Blackreach is not simply a large cave. It is a geologically impossible space. The cavern beneath Skyrim's mountains is large enough to contain a city, to hold a functional ecosystem, to maintain its own internal weather patterns of a sort. The artificial sun at its center, a massive Dwemer construct pulsing with light that should not exist underground, illuminates a space that by all rights should not be there. Glowing mushrooms that are not native to Tamrielic flora light the darker corners. Falmer and their Chorus pets have claimed the ruins, and a dragon named Volthuriol lives there. A dragon, underground, in a place where there is no sky. Nobody fully understands how it got there or why it stayed. Dragons are creatures of the sky, of altitude and wind and the open spaces where sound can travel without interruption. The presence of one in the deepest underground ruin in the game is the kind of detail that rewards extended contemplation. Did the Dwemer find it and bring it there? Did it fly in during some era when the surface entrances were wider? Did it choose to be there, finding something in the deep vibrations of tonal architecture that called to its draconic nature in a way the open sky never had? Blackreach was not always Dwemer territory. Lore suggests it was first occupied by vampire clans in the ancient Merethic era, who established their own underground kingdoms in its depths. The Dwemer came later and built their roads and cities through vampire territory, using the cavern as a subterranean highway connecting several of their major settlements. Then the Snow Elves came, fleeing the surface, seeking Dwemer protection and finding slavery instead. Then the War of the Crag, the underground rebellion of the Falmer against their Dwemer masters, raged through these tunnels for decades, while the surface world had no idea anything was happening beneath their feet. When the Dwemer vanished in 1E700, the Falmer finally had the cave to themselves. All of that history, vampire, Dwemer, Snow Elf, Falmer, layered in the stone and the silence, available to anyone willing to be quiet enough to notice it. Fact 16. The Ethereum Forge exists deep beneath the ruins of Bethalft, and it is the pinnacle of what Dwemer craftsmanship could produce. Ethereum is a rare crystalline mineral with magical properties unlike anything else in the game, a blue-white substance that seems to exist partially outside of normal physical law. The Dwemer warred amongst themselves over Ethereum resources, the conflict ultimately consuming the alliances that had made their civilization stable. The Forge can work this material into objects of extraordinary capability, a crown that lets you maintain two standing stone blessings simultaneously, a shield that can render enemies temporarily ethereal and harmless, a staff that summons Dwemer automatons. These items represent Dwemer craftsmanship, operating at its absolute highest register, objects that the Fourth Era cannot replicate even in principle. The Forge itself is still functional, still perfect, after thousands of years, because the Dwemer built things to last in ways that defy conventional understanding of what lasting means. Fact 17. The Dwemer used actual tonal experiments on living creatures, including the snow whales we discussed earlier. The bones in Kagrenzel, Music City, suggest that the Dwemer studied the sonic abilities of these ancient creatures, potentially harvesting their resonant capacities for use in their larger tonal architecture projects. The rumbling that shakes the ruins' foundations may be the oldest surviving echo of those experiments. The Dwemer were not cruel in the way of people who enjoy cruelty. They were indifferent in the way of people who believe that the scale of their work transcends ordinary moral calculation. That if the goal is to transcend mortality and become something like gods, then the costs along the way are simply the price of the project. They were wrong about that. Or they were right in ways that produced results nobody wanted. The question is still open. Fact 18. Dwemer ruins still contain functioning steam systems. The pipes and pressure valves that riddle their ruins are not decorative. They are carrying steam through a heat exchange system that has been running continuously since before the first humans built permanent settlements in Skyrim. Nobody alive knows how to turn any of it off. Fact 19. The lexicon. The Elder Knowledge quest sends you into Dwemer ruins to find this device for Septimus Cygnus, the hermit obsessed with Dwemer knowledge. Does not just store information. It imprints it directly into the mind of whoever transcribes it. Completing the quest and transcribing the lexicon grants what the game calls the Ancient Knowledge perk, permanently increasing smithing skill and granting a bonus when wearing Dwemer equipment. The perk represents fragments of engineering understanding absorbed from the device. The Dwemer had achieved data transfer that bypassed decades of training, direct neural inscription of expertise. If this technology had survived and been understood, it could have transformed education on a civilizational scale. Instead, one damaged device and an obsessed hermit in an ice cave are all that remain of the most advanced information technology Tamriel has ever seen. Fact 20. Dwarven automatons will attack Falmer on sight. After thousands of years, the machines still recognize the beings who rebelled against their creators and attempt to eliminate them. The enmity of the War of the Crag, that decades-long underground conflict between Dwemer and enslaved snow elves, is still encoded into the behavioral programming of machines that have outlived everyone involved by millennia. The Falmer flee from Centurions, not because they remember the war. They are too far removed from their snow elf origins to carry conscious memory, but because the fear has been trained into their biology across generations of being hunted by things made of brass and steam. Section 3. Dragons, the Dragon War, and the Philosophy of Dominance. Let the night settle around you. We are going somewhere ancient now, before the Greybeards, before the Companions. Before anyone reading this was alive, before the current world had its current shape, there was a war between dragonkind and humanity. And that war changed everything. Fact 21. Alduin is not Akatosh. This is one of the most important theological distinctions in all of Skyrim's lore, and it is one that many players never think about. Imperial scholars tend to interpret Alduin as simply another cultural name for Akatosh, the dragon god of time. Nordic scholars, particularly those who have studied the pre-Dragonborn era carefully, reject this interpretation. Alduin himself provides the most useful testimony. He calls himself the firstborn of Akatosh, the creation of the god, not the god itself. Akatosh is the divine principle of time. Alduin is an entity created by that principle, given a specific cosmic function, and powerful enough that he has been confused with his creator by civilizations that see them only at a distance. Paarthurnax, who knew Alduin as a brother and a master, implies that Alduin's claims to lordship over Akatosh, his assertion that he embodied time itself, were the philosophical break that divided the dragon hierarchy before the Dragon War even began. Alduin was claiming divinity that was not rightfully his, and Parthenax, who had served him faithfully until that point, chose a different path. Fact 22. Dovazul, the dragon language, does not describe reality. It actualizes it. When a dragon speaks a word, they are not producing a label for a concept. They are producing the concept itself in sonic form. When a dragon says the word for fire, they are not describing fire. They are making fire from the word, because in Dovazul, the word and the thing it names are the same thing. The language is not a representation of reality. It is reality, compressed into sound and released by a being whose biology is built to interface with the world at that fundamental level. This is why the Thu'um is powerful. When mortals learn to use Dovazul, they are not learning a combat technique. They are learning to speak in the same register as creation itself. The Greybeards understand this with a completeness that borders on terror. Speaking casually in the dragon tongue, having a conversation, saying hello to a colleague, could reshape reality with every sentence. An ill-considered greeting in Dovazul could cause avalanches, shatter walls, harm anyone within range. This is why they do not speak, not because they lack things to say, because the saying of things has consequences that most mortals cannot afford. Fact 23. The Dragon War was not primarily a military conflict. It was a philosophical one. Dragons ruled because they claimed the right to rule, not through mere strength, though they had that too, but through a cosmological assertion. Dragons were firstborn of Akatosh. They were inherently above mortals. Their dominance was not oppression. It was the natural order, the divine hierarchy playing out in the physical world. The dragon priests who administered human settlements on behalf of draconic overlords did so within this framework. Service to dragons was service to the gods. Rebellion was not just political defiance, it was heresy. What Parthenax did when he defected was something more devastating than losing a battle. He declared the premise false. A dragon, whose entire existence was built on the claim of inherent superiority, looked at that claim and said, "No, it is not true. The hierarchy is not divine. Dragons rule because they are strong, not because the universe requires it." That admission, from inside the hierarchy, from one of Alduin's most trusted lieutenants, gave mortals not just a teacher and the tools to resist. It gave them moral justification. You can fight much harder when you know you are not committing a cosmic sin by doing so. Fact 24. Dragon burial mounds were maintained by devoted cultists for thousands of years. After the Dragon War ended and the remaining dragons were systematically hunted down, their corpses were not left to rot or scattered. Members of the dragon cult carefully preserved draconic remains in the circular mounds you find scattered across Skyrim's landscape. These were not passive graves, they were active worship sites. The cult believed Alduin would return and resurrect the fallen, and they maintained these sites generation after generation, long after the political power of the dragon cult had been broken. The Draugr who guard these mounds are reanimated dragon cult members. They died in service to their dragon masters and continue that service in undeath, maintaining a vigil that has lasted thousands of years. Their devotion was not political or transactional. They genuinely believed in the divinity of dragons and the eventual return of their god. The fact that Alduin did return, that the mounds did serve as resurrection sites, means that in the most literal sense imaginable, those devoted custodians were right to wait. Fact 25. Parthenax's name, in Dovazul, means ambition overlord cruelty. He chose to keep this name after his betrayal of Alduin, after his millennia of meditation and philosophical evolution at the peak of the throat of the world. The name is a reminder of what he was. He does not rename himself something hopeful. He carries the weight of his former self as a constant point of reference. What does it mean to transcend your nature? It means waking up every day with your nature's name and choosing again not to act on it. Not because you no longer feel the pull, because you understand what the pull is and where it leads. He told the Dragonborn, "It is easier to see the right path than to walk it." He has been walking it alone at the top of a cold mountain for longer than most civilizations have existed. Fact 26. The dragon priests of the Merethic era were not originally tyrants. In Atmora, before the Great Migration south, dragon priests served as intermediaries between dragons and humans. The relationship was structured but genuinely beneficial. Dragons provided magical knowledge and protection. Humans provided worship and tribute. Dragon priests managed the boundary between those two communities, translating needs and maintaining peace. Something changed after the migration to Tamriel. The texts are not entirely clear on whether the corruption was initiated by Alduin's growing hunger for absolute dominance or by the different power dynamics of a new continent where humans were more numerous and harder to control. But the dragon priests in Tamriel became something different from what they had been in Atmora. The sacrifices demanded grew more extreme. The laws imposed grew more cruel. The rebellion that became the Dragon War was not a rejection of the original dragon cult philosophy. It was a rejection of what that philosophy had become after it curdled in the heat of absolute power on unfamiliar ground. Fact 27. Forelhost, in the Geralt Mountains, was the dragon cult's last stand. In 1E139, the forces of King Harald discovered this secluded monastery, the final significant concentration of dragon cult loyalists, holdouts who had refused to accept their faith's defeat, even as the last dragons were hunted to extinction around them. Rather than surrender or negotiate, the dragon priest Ragul led a mass suicide. Everyone in the monastery drank poison. King Harald's forces breached the walls to find only corpses. No battle, no final heroic last charge, just the quiet horror of a belief so total that the people who held it chose death over the acknowledgement that they had been wrong. The monastery still exists in Skyrim's fourth era. Ragot's spirit still guards it. The dedication that ended the cult did not end the cult leader. Fact 28. Dragon priests each served specific individual dragons, not Alduin collectively. The 8 high-ranking dragon priests were each bound to their own draconic patron, and their masks, those magnificent, terrifying artifacts you hunt down across Skyrim's ancient ruins, were personalized gifts from those patrons, enchanted to reflect the specific character and domain of the relationship between that priest and that dragon. This is why the masks have such varied enchantments. They are not standard-issue gear. They are the record of 8 individual relationships, 8 specific pacts between mortal servants and divine lords, compressed into objects that outlasted both parties by thousands of years. The priests convened at Labyrinthian, the ancient site called Brumjunar, to settle territorial disputes between draconic domains. The dragon cult was not a simple religious tyranny. It was a complete governmental system, with courts, representatives, and formal dispute resolution mechanisms. It administered an empire. When the Dragon War ended that empire, what fell was not just oppression, but a sophisticated administrative structure that nothing immediately replaced. Fact 29. Alduin can resurrect dragons, but no other dragon can. The specific shout he uses appears to reverse death itself, rather than animate remains. This ability is tied to his role as firstborn, to whatever unique function he occupies in the cosmological structure of the Elder Scrolls universe. And it means that every dragon soul the Dragonborn absorbs is a permanent strategic gain. By taking those souls, the Dragonborn ensures that Alduin cannot refill his ranks indefinitely. The conflict is not just about destroying Alduin, it is about outpacing his resurrection timeline, about making sure that by the time the final confrontation comes, his army is small enough that the world has a chance. Fact 30. The throat of the world is not simply Skyrim's highest peak. It is a temporal wound. When the ancient Nords used an Elder Scroll to banish Alduin, not to kill him, because they could not, but to displace him forward in time, that act created a fracture in the normal flow of moments at the precise location where the spell was cast. Time functions differently at that summit. Past, present, and future intersect abnormally there, which is part of why the Elder Scroll that was used in the banishment remained accessible at the site for thousands of years afterward, waiting for someone who needed to witness the original event through a temporal lens. The snow at the peak never melts. Not because of temperature, it is cold at that altitude, but not impossibly so. Because the magical residue of the most powerful time manipulation ever performed by mortals saturates the landscape. The Greybeards did not choose that mountain for their monastery by accident. They chose it because it is the most magically significant location in Skyrim, the site where mortal will bent the laws of time, where the world was saved by doing something that should not have been possible. Section 4. The Greybeards, the Thuum, and the Weight of Silence. Fact 31. Jurgen Windcaller was, before he became the founder of the Greybeards, one of the most militarily effective Thuum users alive. He fought in the Nordic armies during the Skyrim conquests of the early First Era, a period when Nordic war chiefs routinely used the voice to demolish city gates and break enemy formations. Entire cities fell not to conventional siege, but to a Nord tongue standing before the walls and speaking in a language that walls cannot meaningfully answer. It was a time when reality-warping vocalization was standard military doctrine. Then the Nordic forces were defeated at Red Mountain catastrophically, despite their mastery of the voice. Jurgen survived and spent 7 years in contemplation, trying to understand how the strongest voices in the world had failed. His conclusion was that the gods had punished the Nords for treating a sacred gift as a casual weapon. That the Thu'um was not meant for conquest. That every shout fired at a city gate was a misuse of something that had been given for a higher purpose. When he brought this philosophy to his colleagues, 17 other masters of the voice challenged him in combat to prove him wrong. The legends say Jurgen swallowed their shouts for 3 days straight, simply absorbed every attack they could produce until they lay exhausted and unable to continue, and then those 17 became his first disciples. The way of the voice was born from one man's willingness to be quiet long enough to understand why being loud had failed. Fact 32. When the Greybeards summoned the Dragonborn to High Hrothgar, every NPC in the game had a reaction. Guards across Skyrim commented on hearing it. Jarls discussed it in their courts. Farmers in the fields stopped what they were doing and looked at the sky. The summons rippled through reality like a physical force, audible and palpable across the entire province simultaneously. This is not flavor dialogue. It is the game's honest representation of what it looks like when 4 masters of the voice choose to use their power without any restraint beyond the minimum necessary to make themselves understood. They could level cities with that force. They used it to get someone's attention. The discipline implicit in that restraint, using overwhelming power with absolute precision, demonstrating capability while maintaining perfect control, is a more complete picture of what it means to master the Thu'um than anything the Dragonborn does in combat. The Greybeards do not demonstrate strength by destroying things. They demonstrate it by not destroying things. Fact 33. The Greybeards do not age normally. Masters of the Thu'um can extend their lifespans far beyond normal human limits through the practice of the Way of the Voice. Arngir and his companions at High Hrothgar have been there for decades, potentially centuries. Their aging is slowed dramatically by their mastery of the voice, by the meditative disciplines that regulate their biological processes along with their cosmic ones. They are experiencing time differently from the people who occasionally make the pilgrimage up the 7,000 steps. To them, the centuries pass with the slow weight of deep rock rather than the quick rush of a river. This explains why they seem so genuinely detached from current events, from the Civil War, from the Thalmor's machinations, from all of the political noise that feels so immediate to everyone living in it. They are not indifferent. They have watched enough cycles of that noise to know that the things that feel eternal are usually the things that end fastest. Fact 34. Paarthurnax has been alone at the throat of the world for thousands of years, not in peaceful retirement, in necessary quarantine. Dragons are fundamentally creatures of dominance. The drive to control, to conquer, to claim territory, and superiority, these are not learned behaviors in dragons. They are biological imperatives. Paarthurnax's philosophical rebellion against Elduin was an act of will against his own deepest nature, and maintaining that rebellion requires the same act of choice, every single day, that it required the first time. He told the Dragonborn this directly in the game. He acknowledges his nature. He does not pretend it does not exist. He says, essentially, that the question of whether you can overcome what you are is the most important question there is, and that he works on it continuously without any guarantee of success. His isolation from situations where his instincts might overwhelm his principles is not loneliness in the ordinary sense. It is the most demanding form of ethical practice imaginable, conducting a millennia-long philosophical argument with your own DNA alone on a mountaintop without any audience to perform for. His thousands of years of restraint are, by any honest measure, a more impressive achievement than anything involving fire or combat. Fact 35. The Thu'um has historical uses that have nothing to do with combat. Ancient Nords used shouts for construction, aligning massive stones with sonic precision. For agriculture, stimulating crop growth with specific tonal frequencies that the land responded to. For healing, for long-distance communication, voice carrying across mountain ranges in the old way. For art, musicians in the early Norse traditions of Tamriel could work with the voice to produce sound architectures of extraordinary complexity. The reduction of the Thu'um to primarily a combat application, which is how the Dragonborn predominantly uses it, represents a genuine cultural loss. The knowledge of the voice's peaceful applications eroded as the centuries passed, and the Greybeard's restrictive philosophy became dominant. What was once a comprehensive toolkit for living within and shaping the world became, in most hands, a weapon and nothing else. The way of the voice was meant to preserve the deeper understanding, but the deeper understanding was mostly lost before the philosophy arrived to protect it. Fact 36. When the ancient Nords used the dragon wren shout against Alduin, they created a shout that no dragon can ever learn. Dragon Rend forces a dragon to experience mortal finitude, to feel, for a moment, what it is like to have a body that ends, a life with boundaries, a future that closes. Dragons, as children of Akatosh, are inherently timeless. The concept of mortality is not just foreign to them, it is physically incomprehensible to them, in the way that a color outside the visible spectrum is incomprehensible to human eyes. Dragonrend was created by humans who had been enslaved by dragons. It carries within it the full accumulated experience of human suffering under draconic rule. A shout built from grief and fury and the specific knowledge of what it feels like to be small and mortal and subject to something that considers you livestock. No dragon can produce that shout because no dragon has ever experienced what it describes. It is a weapon forged from a kind of pain that the target of the weapon has never felt and structurally cannot feel, and it works precisely because of that asymmetry. Section 5. The Dark Brotherhood, Sithis, and the Holy Work of Death. The fire is low now, the kind of low that still gives light but no longer crackles, that holds its heat quietly, that asks nothing of you. We are going somewhere still and dark, into the part of Skyrim that smells like ash and whispered words, and the interior of coffins that have been opened recently for purposes nobody official acknowledges. Fact 37. Sithis is not a Daedric prince. This is perhaps the most fundamental misunderstanding people carry about the Dark Brotherhood's theology. The Daedric princes are divine entities with their own planes of oblivion, their own personalities, their own desires and agendas. They exist as distinct beings with something like consciousness and intentionality. Sithis is not any of these things. Sithis is the void, the primordial nothingness that existed before creation, not a being that lives in the void, not an entity that rules the void. The void itself, insofar as something that is nothing, can be called anything at all. The Dark Brotherhood worships entropy, change, the inevitable dissolution that must accompany creation, because nothing that is made can exist without something to unmake it eventually. Each assassination they perform is, in their theology, an act of service to this cosmic principle, hastening the return of something to the nothing from which it came. Murder as sacrament, death as prayer. The fact that it pays well is incidental to the deeper function. Fact 38. The Night Mother was a Dunmer woman who bore 5 children by Sithis, which is to say, she claimed Sithis as the father, and her community, understandably, found this difficult to accept. Sithis is the void. Whatever the metaphysical mechanism involved, the children were real. 2 years after their birth, she killed them all, sending their souls to the void, to their father. The village burned her house down and killed her for it. 30 years later, a man somewhere in Tamriel began hearing a voice in his mind, a woman's voice, patient and specific. She told him where she was buried and what she wanted. He went to her tomb, became the first listener, and founded the Dark Brotherhood. Her preserved corpse, mummified, maintained through dark magic, has traveled with the Brotherhood ever since, carried by its keeper, housed in a coffin, consulted by listeners who press their ear to the wood and hear her whisper contracts back. She is simultaneously dead and the organization's highest authority. She receives prayers from people desperate enough to perform the Black Sacrament and translates them into actionable assignments. Whether the consciousness that inhabits that corpse is the original Night Mother, a Daedric entity impersonating her, or something else entirely, the game leaves genuinely unresolved. The fact that it works, that she genuinely provides accurate contract information, suggests something genuine is happening in that wood and preserved linen. What that something is, nobody in the Brotherhood seems entirely certain. Fact 39. The Black Sacrament is self-selecting. To summon the Brotherhood, a person must create an effigy of their intended victim using bone meal, nightshade, human flesh, and a human heart, then stab it with a dagger while chanting a specific incantation. The ritual must be performed with genuine conviction and genuine hatred. A casual or half-hearted performance produces nothing. Only someone who has arrived at a place of true commitment to wanting another person dead, someone who has crossed some internal threshold and is willing to do something actively horrifying to communicate that crossing, can complete the ritual in a way that reaches the Night Mother. This is elegant institutional security. The Brotherhood does not advertise. It does not recruit from among the general public. It waits for the public to come to it in ways that demonstrate the depth of their need. Only those truly committed to ending a specific life will endure the Black Sacrament. Law enforcement entrapments fail because agents sent to perform the ritual don't believe in it sufficiently. The organization has survived for centuries under active persecution by virtually every government in Tamriel, partly because of this natural filter. Fact 40. Aventus Aretino, the child in Windhelm who performs the Black Sacrament at the start of the Dark Brotherhood questline, succeeds. A child succeeds at this ritual. He stole his mother's remains from the Hall of the Dead to use in the ceremony. He spent weeks in an empty house, chanting in the dark, surrounded by bones and nightshade, and the objects of a ritual that most adults would not attempt. He did this because Grelod the Kind, the headmistress of Honor Hall Orphanage, was beating and starving the children in Herkur, and every other avenue of appeal had been exhausted or was simply unavailable to a child with no resources. The quest forces a quiet recognition that the system failed Aventus so completely that a 10-year-old's only viable option was to summon assassins. The Brotherhood's arrival in response to a child's desperate ritual is presented matter-of-factly, without melodrama, in a way that says more about institutional cruelty than any lecture could. When you kill Grelod and return to Aventus, his relief is immediate and total. He thanks you and goes to find his grandmother. The children at the orphanage are saved by a murder. The people who should have saved them were doing something else. Fact 41. Cicero, the eccentric jester who serves as the Night Mother's keeper in Skyrim, was the last surviving member of the Dark Brotherhood's Cyrodiil chapter before that chapter was destroyed. For years, he was completely alone with only the Night Mother's corpse for company. His journals, which you can find in the game, document the gradual deterioration of a person who was genuinely devoted to his organization's traditions but had no one to practice those traditions with. He maintained the rituals. He performed the rites. He spoke to the corpse because there was literally no one else to speak to. His madness is not random or stylistic. It is the documented result of years of absolute isolation, maintained faith in an institution that had effectively ceased to exist, and a sense of duty that outlasted all the social structures that usually give duty its meaning. When players meet Cicero, they are meeting someone broken by loyalty, by the specific kind of damage that comes from caring about something so much that you continue long after any reasonable person would have stopped. Fact 42. The 5 tenets of the Dark Brotherhood are not suggestions. They are absolute laws whose violation means execution without trial or appeal. The tenets forbid theft from Brotherhood members, killing Brotherhood members, betrayal of the Brotherhood to outside parties, disobedience to the chain of command, and refusal of a contract. Astrid, the Skyrim Sanctuary's leader by the time the Dragonborn encounters the Brotherhood, has abandoned the tenets and restructured the Sanctuary around a more personal, familial hierarchy. She calls herself the Authority. She ignores the Night Mother. She makes unilateral decisions that the Brotherhood's traditional structure would not permit. Her eventual betrayal of the Brotherhood to the Empire, leading to the destruction of most of the Sanctuary, is precisely what the tenets were designed to prevent. They are not bureaucratic formality. They are the hard-won institutional knowledge of an organization that has survived for centuries by understanding exactly which rules cannot be bent without the whole structure failing. When the leader breaks the foundational rules, the organization collapses. The Brotherhood's destruction in Skyrim is not an external defeat. It is the predictable result of internal corruption, exactly as the tenets predicted it would be. Fact 43. The Morag Tong predates the Dark Brotherhood and operates on opposite philosophical principles while practicing identical methods. The Morag Tong are sanctioned killers, licensed by the Tribunal of Morrowind to perform legally mandated religious killings, writs of execution issued by religious authority, performed in the open without the Brotherhood's secrecy. They worship Mephala, the Daedric prince of murder and secrets. The Brotherhood split from the Morag Tong after the death of the potentate in 2E324, during a period of chaos that left the Tong weakened and their philosophical framework in question. The splinter group rejected the legal framework entirely and embraced pure service to Sithis, death for its own sake, as a cosmic principle, without the administrative legitimacy that the Tong depended on. Both organizations exist simultaneously. Both practice assassination. Both have survived for centuries. They regard each other as rivals born from the same original impulse, separated by a philosophical schism that neither has resolved and neither particularly wants to. Section 6, Cosmic Architecture, Stars, Time, and the Shape of Everything. Fact 44. The stars in the Elder Scrolls universe are not distant suns. They are holes in reality. When the original divine beings, the Itaeda, the original spirits, worked together to create Mundus, the mortal world, the act consumed most of their divinity. Some of them chose to abandon the project before it was complete. Magnus, the god of magic, was the most significant departure. His escape from Mundus ripped a large hole in the barrier between the mortal realm and Aetherius, the sea of pure magical energy beyond all known existence. That hole is the sun. The light that comes through it is magical energy from the divine realm bleeding into the mortal world. The other departing spirits, the Magna Gae, followed Magnus and tore smaller holes as they went. Those holes are the stars. Every point of light in the night sky is an exit wound from creation, a place where a divine being chose transcendence over commitment to the world they helped make. The light from stars is magical energy leaking through from the place the gods went when they left. This makes every night sky a record of divine abandonment, and every sunrise a reminder that the hole through which you are receiving light was torn by the single most consequential desertion in the history of the universe. Magica, the energy that powers all spellcasting on Nirn, flows into the world through these stellar perforations. Magic works because gods left holes when they fled. The cosmos provides, in death and absence, something it perhaps could not have provided through presence. Fact 45. Akatosh and Auriel are the same entity. The Imperial Akatosh and the Aldmeri Auriel, the elven god of time, worshipped across High Rock and Somerset, are cultural interpretations of the same cosmic principle. When Alessia, the first Dragonborn, established the 8 divines as the state religion of the First Empire, she created a deliberate religious synthesis designed to unify her diverse population. Akatosh emerged from this merger, incorporating aspects of Alduin as a time-related entity, aspects of Auriel as the elven time god, and the broader framework of time divinity that spans all Elder Scrolls cultures. The theological truth beneath the cultural variations is that divinity transcends the names mortals assign to it. The same cosmic principle manifests differently to different peoples based on their history, their needs, their relationship with time and creation. Akatosh, Auriel, and the various other time-related deities across Tamriel are all pointing at the same transcendent reality. They are maps of the same territory, drawn from different vantage points and different traditions, and none of them captures the territory completely. Fact 46. Elder Scrolls, the actual objects, are not books. They are not records in any conventional sense. They exist outside of time, containing information about all possible past and future events simultaneously, but making that information accessible only at specific moments to specific individuals whose place in the timeline aligns with what the scroll contains. Reading an Elder Scroll at the wrong moment produces blindness and madness. Reading one at the right moment produces genuine vision into events that have not happened yet, or that happened so long ago that no physical record survives. The individuals who study and interpret Elder Scrolls professionally, the moth priests of the Empire, go permanently blind after extended exposure. The blindness is considered a mark of deepening sight, of moving beyond the visible into something the eyes were never built to process. By the time a moth priest can no longer see at all, they can read the scrolls without touching them, through whatever faculty replaces vision in a person who has spent long enough looking at the shape of time. Fact 47. The ideal masters, who rule the soul cairn, are a category of being that does not fit neatly into the existing cosmological taxonomy. They were once mortal sorcerers who sought immortality through increasingly extreme means, eventually transforming themselves into pure crystalline abstraction, entities of pure concept with no physical body, no location in conventional space, existing as ideas that happen to have agency and desire. They rule a plane of oblivion filled with the souls of people who were soul-trapped and had their spiritual energy used for enchanting, and they maintain that realm as a kind of farm for harvested souls. Every enchanted weapon in Skyrim that was made using a soul gem is powered by someone in the soul cairn. Every time you recharge your dragonbone sword at an enchantment table, you are drawing on a soul trapped in a twilight wasteland. The moral implications of this are available to anyone who follows the Dawnguard questline far enough, and the game does not shy away from them. The soul cairn is populated entirely by people who committed no crime except being killed by someone with a soul trap spell. The practice of soul gem enchanting is, by the internal logic of the Elder Scrolls universe, a form of spiritual kidnapping that condemns people to an eternity in a purple wasteland managed by entities that were once human and became something that has no meaningful relationship with humanity anymore. Fact 48. There are 16 Daedric princes, each controlling their own plane of oblivion, each representing a fundamental principle or set of principles that exist in tension with the mortal world. Their realms are not simply locations. They are physical manifestations of their rulers' natures. Hermaeus Mora's Apocrypha is an endless library of dark-covered books containing all knowledge ever produced and much that has not been produced yet. Mehrunes Dagon's Deadlands are volcanic devastation, a realm of perpetual destruction. Sheogorath's Shivering Isles are chromatic madness, a world that functions on the logic of the unhinged and finds that logic internally consistent. Meridia's Sphere is light and life. She despises undeath and necromancy with a fervor that approaches genuine horror, not because it is politically inconvenient, but because she was once a Magna Gay, one of the lesser gods who followed Magnus out of creation, and she remembers what life was before it could be perverted. She was expelled from the divine hierarchy for refusing to abandon her interest in the mortal world, and became neither truly Adric nor traditionally Daedric, something between, something that genuinely cares about mortals while being utterly willing to spend them in service of principles they did not consent to serve. Fact 49. The soul cairn has a hidden boss, the Reaper. To summon it, you must find 3 Reaper gem fragments scattered throughout the zone and bring them to a specific altar. The Reaper is the cairn's warden, the enforcer who ensures that trapped souls remain contained, who maintains the integrity of the prison. He exists not as a creature of malice, but as a function, a mechanism of the ideal master's administration, doing the work that the realm requires whether or not he has any feeling about it. His existence raises questions the game does not answer. Who created him? Does he have consciousness? Does he understand what he is? In a realm built entirely on the concept of souls being denied their natural destination, is the Reaper also a soul that was denied something? Is the warden of the prison also a prisoner? Fact 50. The White Gold Tower is visible from Skyrim's map. If you rotate the in-game map to look south, you can see the tower rising from Cyrodiil's Imperial City, simplified but recognizable. This is not an Easter egg. It is actual game geography. Bethesda included a compressed version of the Cyrodiil world space on Skyrim's map, and the landmark is visible across provincial borders because the landmark is genuinely that large, and the 2 provinces are genuinely that close. Using console commands to remove the invisible borders and walk south reveals a rough but present version of Oblivion's Imperial City, existing just beyond what the Dragonborn can normally reach. The playable space is not the totality of the world, it is a window. Section 7. Politics, Factions, and the War. Nobody wins. Fact 51. The Civil War in Skyrim has no ending that leaves Skyrim in a good position. Neither does. This is not a design oversight. It is intentional. An imperial victory maintains the presence of a weakened, compromise-driven empire that enforces the Talos ban under Thalmor pressure, denying Nordic religious freedom while providing the nominal stability of continued imperial governance. A Stormcloak victory creates an independent Skyrim, separated from imperial military and economic support, diplomatically isolated, exhausted from civil war, and facing the Aldmeri Dominion alone. The Thalmor want neither side to win decisively. Their documents, found in the embassy during the diplomatic immunity quest, state this explicitly. Both outcomes are undesirable. The ideal is perpetual war. Every soldier killed on either side is one fewer warrior available to resist the Dominion. Every gold piece spent on internal conflict is a resource diverted from preparation for an external one. The Thalmor are playing a generational game, accepting short-term complications for long-term dominance, and they are winning it regardless of which faction you choose. Fact 52. Ulfric's Stormcloak is listed in the Thalmor's own documents as a classified asset, status dormant, uncooperative. This is a document you can find and read in the game. The Thalmor captured Ulfric during the Great War, tortured him, and led him to believe that information he provided under duress was crucial to the fall of the imperial city, a claim that was a deliberate lie, since the city had already fallen before he broke. They allowed him to escape, carrying guilt and wounded pride and a burning need to reclaim some version of the honor he felt he had lost. They did not have to do anything else. The manipulation was already complete. Ulfric's genuine passion for Nord independence, his authentic anger at imperial weakness, and Thalmor religious persecution made him exactly the right kind of tool, one that works perfectly precisely because it does not know it is being used. The documents note that his death would be unhelpful because an imperial victory would be as bad as a Stormcloak victory. The civil war needs to keep going. Ulfric is more useful alive and fighting than dead and mourned. He is not a villain in the straightforward sense. He is a man who was broken by specific people in specific ways, who rebuilt himself around a genuine cause, who fights with genuine conviction for something real, and who is, in the process, accomplishing exactly what his tormentors needed him to accomplish. That is a specific kind of tragedy that the game lets you find and sit with, or miss entirely depending on how carefully you search the desks at the Thalmor Embassy. Fact 53. The Forsworn of the Reach are the indigenous population of the Reach, not a gang of bandits. They are descended from the Reachmen, the original Breton inhabitants of Markarth and the surrounding territory, a culture with distinct traditions, magic, and history that predates the Nordic conquest of the area. The Markarth incident, in which Ulfric used the voice to retake the city from a forsworn uprising in exchange for promises of religious tolerance that he subsequently broke under Thalmor pressure, radicalized a generation of moderate Reachmen into joining the violent Forsworn movement. Their guerrilla warfare and attacks on Nordic settlers are presented in the game as simple enemy behavior, the kind of thing you encounter and respond to with weapons. But the context is the context of a people fighting for land that was taken from them, using whatever means remain available after conventional resistance has been systematically dismantled. They are simultaneously terrorists in the means they use, and freedom fighters in the cause they represent. And the game respects the player enough to provide the information necessary to understand both of those things simultaneously, rather than flattening them into uncomplicated antagonists. Fact 54. Maven Blackbriar functionally controls Riften, despite the Jarl's nominal authority. She runs the Thieves Guild, has connections with the Dark Brotherhood, owns the meadery that employs a significant percentage of the city's workforce, and holds leverage over virtually every important political figure in the hold, including the Jarl's own steward. She does this through an elegant understanding of where power actually lives, in control of information, in economic dependency, in the quiet threat of what she knows and what she can arrange. If the Imperials win the Civil War, Maven is appointed as Jarl, which does not change her power at all. It simply makes visible what was always functionally true. Fact 55. The Khajiit caravans that camp outside Skyrim's cities, forbidden inside the walls by most Jarls who distrust them based on the usual racial suspicions, serve as Elswehr's intelligence network within the province. They travel freely between holds, encounter every traveler on every road, observe military movements and economic conditions, and report back. Their commercial function is real, but it is secondary to the information gathering that constitutes their primary value to Elswehr's leadership. Some caravans also distribute skooma, using the addiction it creates as leverage to develop informants among the Nord population. It is a clean, self-sustaining intelligence operation. Supply an illegal substance, create dependency, harvest information from those who would rather betray their neighbors than go without their supply. Every purchase you make from Risad or Akari is, in this light, a small participation in an espionage operation that most of the people involved have never noticed. Fact 56. Windhelm is the oldest city in Skyrim, founded by Ysgramor himself. It is also, by the evidence the game provides, one of the most institutionally racist. Dark Elves, Dunmer refugees who have lived in Skyrim for 200 years, since Red Mountain's eruption devastated Morrowind in 4E5, are confined to the Grey Quarter, a slum of deteriorating buildings and limited opportunity, despite their community having been in Skyrim long enough for multiple generations to have been born there, knowing no other home. Argonians are not permitted inside the city walls at all, regardless of their status or history. They live and work on the docks outside, excluded from the city's nominal protections and services. Ulfric, who speaks passionately about Nord freedom and self-determination, does nothing about any of this during his tenure as Jarl. His freedom is specific. It applies to Nords. The rhetoric of liberation, delivered from a city that maintains formal exclusion of two entire races from its civic life, is one of the quieter indictments the game places before you without insisting you pick it up. Fact 57. The companions deliberately reject political power. Despite their age, reputation, and the genuine admiration most of Skyrim's people hold for them, they take no side in the civil war. They accept contracts from both Imperial and Stormcloak factions. Their headquarters in Whiterun's Jorrvaskr is technically separate from the city's political structure. This is not cowardice or disinterest. It is the oldest organizational policy the companions have, dating back to their founding. They serve Skyrim, not the government that currently claims Skyrim. The distinction has kept them intact through every political change the province has experienced for thousands of years, and it will keep them intact through whatever changes follow. Fact 58. Clavicus Vile's quest in Skyrim contains a deliberate trap. When you complete it, you can receive the Rueful Axe instead of the Mask of Clavicus Vile. The axe does not count toward the Daedric artifact achievement because it is not genuinely a Daedric artifact in the required sense. It is Clavicus Vile testing whether you understand that Daedric princes do not give genuine rewards without the completion of their specific desires. The axe is the wrong answer. Taking it means being tricked. The game does not explain this. You either understand it or you do not, and either outcome is, from Clavicus Vile's perspective, equally entertaining. Fact 59. The ebony blade does not simply absorb life force. It specifically grows stronger when used to murder people who trust the wielder. Friends, followers, spouses, NPCs who have traveled with you, helped you, shared their fire and their company. These are the victims the blade requires. Each betrayal makes it more powerful. This design reflects Mephalah's sphere, the Daedric prince of lies, secrets, and plots, with precision. The weapon does not reward honest combat or tactical effectiveness. It rewards the specific act of using someone's trust as the instrument of their death. Players must actively choose to murder NPCs who care about them in order to fully charge the blade, making it a moral test disguised as a power reward. Every player who fully charges that weapon has a specific list of faces they chose to do it with. Section 8. Daedric Princes and Their Terrible Gifts. Fact 60. Hermaeus Mora is arguably the most dangerous Daedric prince. This is not an obvious claim. Mehrunes Dagon invades entire planes of existence. Molag Bal created vampirism as an act of violation and domination. But Hermaeus Mora's danger is patient and compounding in a way that violence is not. He collects knowledge, all knowledge, including the kind that destroys the people who possess it, including secrets that should not exist, information that violates the structural integrity of a person's understanding of the world. His realm, Apocrypha, is an endless library containing every text ever written and many that have not been written yet. The black books that serve as portals to his realm and sources of power require reading materials that were never meant for human minds. The knowledge they contain is genuine and useful. The price is service. Scholars and mages, the people most drawn to what Mora offers, become his servants through the mechanism of their own greatest strength. the insatiable desire to know more. By the time they understand what they have agreed to, they are too deeply in his debt to easily leave. He does not conquer, he curates. And his collection of souls grows by one every time someone opens a book that was too interesting to put down. Fact 61. Miraak, the first Dragonborn, made exactly this mistake. He was a dragon priest in the Merethic era, serving his draconic overlords on Solstheim, when Hermaeus Mora offered him the knowledge of Bend Will, a shout powerful enough to compel obedience from any being, including dragons. Miraak accepted. He learned. He turned on his masters, killing dragons with the power they had given him, building his own cult at the summit of Solstheim's highest mountain. Another dragon priest, Vahlok the Jailer, remained loyal and confronted Miraak. Their battle was catastrophic enough to physically reshape geography. The combat between two peak-tier magic users of the Merethic era tore Solstheim away from the Skyrim mainland, creating the strait that now separates them. Vahlok won the battle, but before he could deliver the killing blow, Hermaeus Mora snatched Miraak away to Apocrypha, where Mora's champion remained for thousands of years, studying and growing in power and looking for a way out, unable to leave the realm of the being who had saved him by claiming him. Miraak escaped the dragon hierarchy by accepting a different master. Whether that constitutes freedom is a philosophical question the game presents without resolving. Fact 62. Nocturnal, Daedric Prince of Night and Luck, maintains a pact with the Thieves' Guild that has material consequences for their success rate. The Skeleton Key, her artifact, capable of opening any lock, kept the guild prosperous for generations. When Mercer Frey stole it for personal use, the guild's luck evaporated. Not metaphorically, literally. Their operations began failing. Members died in circumstances that previous levels of Nocturnal's favor would have prevented. The connection between divine patronage and practical outcome is not symbolic in the Elder Scrolls universe. It is causal and measurable. The questline involves returning the Skeleton Key to Nocturnal's realm of Evergloam rather than keeping it, sacrificing a uniquely powerful item to restore the divine relationship that makes the guild functional. Nocturnal's price for her favor is not sacrifice or worship in any dramatic sense. She wants devotion and the occasional appropriation of things that don't belong to the appropriator. In exchange, she provides the kind of luck that makes the impossible merely difficult. It is not a bad deal, as Daedric arrangements go, but it requires understanding that the luck is borrowed, not owned, and that borrowed things must eventually be returned. Fact 63. The Wabbajack, Sheogorath's artifact, does not have consistent effects. It might transform enemies into sweet rolls, summon hostile Dremora, cast lightning, turn targets into piles of gold coins, spawn creatures, produce any of dozens of unpredictable results with no pattern and no guarantee. This perfectly represents Sheogorath's nature as the embodiment of chaos and madness, a weapon that actively resists being a weapon in any tactical sense, that remains useful only to someone willing to embrace outcomes beyond their control. The Sheogorath encountered in Skyrim appears, based on considerable in-game evidence, to be the hero of Kvatch from Oblivion, who mantled Sheogorath at the end of the Shivering Isles expansion, became the entity so perfectly through acting out its role that reality accepted the substitution as genuine. This would explain why Skyrim's Sheogorath seems slightly more coherent, slightly more grounded than the Prince of Madness typically appears. He is a relatively recent mortal who achieved divinity through perfect imitation, and beneath the madness there is still someone who remembers being a person, who knows things about the Oblivion crisis that only someone who was there could know. Fact 64. Namira, Daedric Prince of Darkness and Revulsion, rewards cannibalism. Her quest rewards the Ring of Namira, which grants increased stamina and the ability to feed on corpses for health regeneration. The design here is precise and characteristically Daedric. She does not care about the thing mortals find abhorrent. She values the act of crossing the boundary that others refuse to approach. The ring does not make cannibalism a casual habit for the player mechanically. You have to choose it each time. The prince is not interested in what you do without thinking. She is interested in what you deliberately choose to do across the line you drew for yourself. Fact 65. Molag Bal created vampirism through an act of fundamental violation. The lore is stark about this. The first vampire was a mortal woman he claimed and corrupted, and the condition spread through blood, creating a lineage of transformation that descends from that original crime. This origin, not an accident, not a deal, but an act of domination over something that could not resist, explains vampirism's fundamental nature as a curse rather than a gift, a condition of constant hunger and self-revision that reflects its creator's sphere. Pureblood vampires, like Serana and her family, trace their ancestry closer to this source, which grants superior capabilities compared to common vampires who have been infected through spreading rather than direct creation. The Volkihar clan represents vampire royalty, beings who have maintained their sophistication and cultural complexity across millennia, who hold courts and pursue long-term political objectives, who are predators with genuine civilizational achievements. Harkon's plan to blot out the sun is the ultimate vampire project, the removal of their primary weakness to establish permanent dominance. His daughter Serana's rejection of this plan is the more interesting choice, and the one that suggests that even among the most powerful undead, there are those who have thought carefully about what it means to exist alongside mortals rather than above them. Fact 66. Mehrunes' razor has a small but real chance to instantly kill any target regardless of their level or health. This means it can, theoretically, kill a dragon, or Alduin, or any named boss in the game. The probability is low enough that it cannot be relied on tactically, but real enough that it triggers occasionally in genuine gameplay. The razor's lore states that it has been the instrument of assassination throughout history, that kings and emperors have died to this blade not through the assassin's skill, but through the chance activation of an edge that severs fate rather than flesh. When the instant kill triggers, the target simply ceases. No dramatic death sequence, no staggered fall, just absence. The razor represents pure destructive force, Mehrunes Dagon's sphere of revolution and destruction, compressed into a blade that does not care about armor ratings or magical wards. Section 9. Races, Curses, and the Long Wait of History. Fact 67. The Dunmer were not always dark-skinned with red eyes. They were the Chimer, golden-skinned elves who worshipped the Daedric princes and followed the prophet Veloth into Morrowind. When the Tribunal, the three god-kings of Morrowind, Vivec, Almalexia, and Sotha-Sil, murdered their friend and ally Nerevar and stole power from the heart of Lorkhan, Azura cursed the entire Chimer race. The transformation was total and immediate. Their golden skin became the gray-ash color of the Dunmer. Their eyes turned red. The change was not magical or reversible through any available means. It was written into their biology at every level, passed to every subsequent generation, regardless of personal culpability. The transformation proves something about the Daedric princes that is easy to miss in their various schemes and gifts. They can rewrite species, not just individuals, not just families, entire races, permanently, at a single decision. Azura's curse was a kind of divine copyright stamp, a marking that would travel through every Dunmer bloodline for the rest of history, ensuring that every dark elf who ever lived would carry on their skin the record of what their leaders had done thousands of years before any of them were born. Collective punishment at civilizational scale, the kind of thing a being outside of time finds conceptually natural, and a mortal finds deeply unjust for reasons that Azura may have considered and may not have. Fact 68. The Snow Elves, before their enslavement and transformation into the Falmer, were a sophisticated civilization with architecture of genuine beauty, religious practices centered on the worship of Oriel, their cultural name for Akatosh, and a social structure that placed pilgrimage at the center of spiritual life. The Forgotten Vale, the hidden valley accessible through Dawnguard's quest line, is one of the last surviving examples of Snow Elf architecture. Frozen waterfalls, ice formations shaped with deliberate artistry, ancient ruins that still hold the shape of something graceful, even in their deterioration. Night Paladin Gelibor, one of two known surviving snow elves in Skyrim's era, calls the transformed Falmer the Betrayed, not monsters, not enemies. His kin, betrayed first by the Nords who drove them underground, then by the Dwemer who blinded and enslaved them. He has watched the passage of thousands of years in his secluded chantry, maintaining a ritual that lost its congregation long ago, serving a faith that has no other practitioners. The Forgotten Vale is one of the most quietly devastating environments in the game. You walk through the ruins of what a civilization could have been if the history had been different. if Ysgramor had not returned, if the Dwemer had been capable of genuine hospitality, if one decision had been made differently at any of several points. The Falmer who inhabit the Val cannot see it. The beauty that was theirs has been invisible to them for thousands of years. Fact 69. The Dunmer refugees in Windhelm have been there for 200 years. The Red Year, when Red Mountain erupted in 4E5 and devastated Morrowind, drove a mass exodus of dark elves into Skyrim. That was 2 centuries before the events of the game. Multiple generations of Dunmer have been born in Skyrim, speaking the Nordic languages, knowing no other home than the Grey Quarter's narrow streets. They are not immigrants in any functional sense. They are established residents facing systematic discrimination that has persisted for 2 centuries and shows no signs of abating. The contrast with the rhetoric about Nordic freedom and independence is available to anyone who spends time in Windhelm and pays attention to what the people who live there actually say to each other. Fact 70. The orcs of Skyrim's strongholds operate under a code called the Code of Malakath, named for their Daedric patron, and this code supersedes all Nordic or imperial law within the walls of a stronghold. The Jarls who nominally govern the territories where strongholds sit have no practical authority inside them. The orcs don't acknowledge it. Forcing compliance would require a military operation, and nobody in Skyrim in the Fourth Era has the interest or resources to make that happen. The strongholds represent independent micronations within Skyrim's political borders. Women do the hunting and gathering. Men focus on smithing and defense. The chief's authority is absolute until successfully challenged in personal combat, at which point it transfers immediately. Anyone can enter a stronghold if they have proven themselves to any orc by providing a service. Living there permanently requires full cultural adoption. This is a complete functional civilization existing within another civilization's nominal sovereignty, quietly maintaining its own traditions and refusing to ask permission. Fact 71. Kodlak Whitemane, the harbinger of the companions at the time of the game, has lycanthropy against his will, or rather, was given it without fully understanding the spiritual consequences at the time he accepted it. The beast blood makes companions stronger and more effective in combat. It also prevents them from entering Sovngarde after death, because the wolf spirit that inhabits them claims their soul on death rather than releasing it to the Nordic afterlife. For a Nord warrior who has spent his entire life trying to earn an honorable death and an honorable afterlife, this is not a minor concern. It is the difference between everything he worked for and nothing. Kodlak spent his later years researching a cure, desperate to find a way to cleanse his soul before death. His quest, which the Dragonborn can complete on his behalf even after his death, is the whole moral weight of the companion's storyline. A funeral that is not just about honoring a fallen leader, but about saving a soul from exclusion from the place it earned 1,000 times over. Fact 72. Sanguinare vampiris, the most common strain of vampirism in Skyrim, is one variant among many. Different strains exist, created at different points in history by different agents or through different mechanisms of transmission. Pureblood vampires like Serana carry ancient bloodlines closer to Moligbal's original act of creation. The Dawnguard content makes the theological dimension of vampire weakness to sunlight explicit. The sun does not damage vampires simply because light is physically harmful to their condition. It damages them because Oriel's bow was used to sanctify the sun against undead. The sunlight that reaches vampires carries an active anti-undead blessing, and they suffer because of what that light has been made to mean, not because of what it is chemically. Fact 73. Serana's mother, Valerica, sealed herself in the soul cairn to prevent Harkon from using her blood to complete his ritual. She chose confinement in a twilight wasteland populated by trapped souls over allowing her daughter to be sacrificed for her husband's ambition. She has been there for potentially centuries, neither truly alive nor exactly dead, waiting in the company of the ideal masters. When the Dragonborn finds her, she has maintained her mental clarity through sheer force of will in an environment specifically designed to erode it. The Soul Cairn is a waiting room for people who should have moved on. Valerica is someone who chose to wait, and the choice is different when it is not imposed. Section 10. Hidden Details, Developer Secrets, and the Seams of the World. You are still here, so am I. The night is further along now than it was when we started. or the morning is coming on depending on where you are. Either way, you have earned some of the smaller stories, the ones that live at the edges of the world, where the developers left personal marks in the stone. Fact 74. At the very summit of the throat of the world, if you climb above the normal playable area using careful jumping mechanics, you will find a pickaxe embedded in a rock. It is called the Notched Pickaxe and provides a bonus to smithing. In 2011, Bethesda and Mojang, the company behind Minecraft, were engaged in a legal dispute over the name of a game Mojang was developing. The dispute was settled out of court. The Notched Pickaxe was Bethesda's response, a tribute to Marcus Notch Persson, Minecraft's creator, hidden at the highest point in their game. Both Skyrim and Minecraft released in November 2011, and the timing made the reference land with particular warmth. The developers who put that pickaxe there were playing Minecraft during their breaks and wanted to acknowledge it, regardless of what the lawyers were doing. Fact 75. Eric the Slayer, a follower you can recruit in Rorikstead after helping him convince his father and purchasing him armor, is named after Eric West, a Skyrim fan who died of cancer before the game's release. His family requested that Bethesda include a character in his honor. Eric West loved the game he never got to play, and so Bethesda put him in it. As a farm boy who dreams of adventure, who asks you to help him become the hero he always imagined. He is flagged as non-essential, meaning he can die permanently if not protected. Some players find this disrespectful. Others see it as accurate tribute, giving him the adventures he could not have in life, with the real stakes he would have wanted. He exists in Skyrim. He always will. That is a specific kind of immortality that the game offers him. Fact 76. Maik the Liar, the wandering Khajiit who appears in multiple Elder Scrolls games, functions as Bethesda's self-insertion into their own world. He is a character who exists to comment on game design decisions, acknowledge bugs, reference features removed between editions, and deliver developer commentary wrapped in the plausible deniability of a character who claims to lie about everything. His references to calipers, removed as inventory items, are notes from the team to players who remember. His acknowledgement of dragons flying backward was an admission of a genuine bug. His name provides the mechanism. He is a liar, so nothing he says must be true, which paradoxically makes everything he says worth examining. He has appeared in Arena, Daggerfall, Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim. Either multiple Khajiit share the name across generations, or there is a single Maik who has been wandering the world for 3 eras. Either interpretation fits. The Elder Scrolls has always had room for things that should not be possible, but are not formally forbidden. Fact 77. Vendor inventories in Skyrim are stored in physical chests buried beneath each major city outside the playable map. This is not symbolic or metaphorical. The data structures that represent what a merchant has available for sale exist as actual container objects in the game world, placed underground by the developers as a practical solution to inventory management. The most accessible is in Dawnstar, near the Ironbreaker mine, where players can access the Khajiit caravan merchant's chest through specific terrain manipulation. It is an unintentional window into game development methodology, the literal nuts and bolts of how merchants work beneath the surface presentation. Every player who ever bought a potion from a wandering vendor was interacting with the visible end of a system, whose other end is a box buried in the ground. Fact 78. The map in Skyrim is a real-time 3-dimensional render of the actual game world. When players open the map, they are looking at Skyrim from above, processed in real time. This means that any visually dramatic action in the game world appears on the map. Absorbing a dragon soul creates an orange glow visible on the map interface. Dramatic spell effects can be spotted. Weather patterns visible on the map are the actual weather patterns of the game world at that moment. The map is not an abstraction of the world. It is a view of the world from a different vantage point, which is why it sometimes shows the day-night cycle, fog, and precipitation, because it is literally looking at those things from above. Fact 79. The gourds scattered throughout Skyrim are modeled after real plants. Specifically, they are based on Kushaw squash, a native plant of Mexico still used in baking and cooking. Bethesda's art team studied actual gourds to create the in-game versions, producing those irregular, odd-shaped vegetables that players spend enormous amounts of time kicking around ruins and launching off mountains with unrelenting force. The terrible physics that make gourds behave more like unstable projectiles than sensible food items are not based on the actual physical properties of Kushaw squash. That part Bethesda added themselves, and it became one of the more beloved unintentional features of the game. Fact 80. Heimsker, the street preacher of Whiterun who stands in the market square shouting about Talos, was a respected scholar before the White Gold Concordat banned Talos worship. He specialized in Nordic theology, and his academic work focused specifically on the metaphysical implications of the Talos question. When the ban took effect, his research led him to conclude that outlawing Talos worship would have consequences beyond the political. He began preaching publicly because measured academic arguments had failed to move anyone, because the journals would not publish his findings, because the people with the power to change things had decided the Thalmor's demands were not worth resisting. Years of being mocked and ignored turned his delivery increasingly extreme. His sermons grew louder and less conventionally structured, not because he became irrational, but because rationality had demonstrably failed to work. He is an academic whose expertise became a liability the moment political reality made his conclusions inconvenient. The man shouting in the market square is not a figure of fun if you understand what he used to be and what he lost to end up there. He is still making the same argument he always made. He just cannot make it quietly anymore. Fact 81. Sibyl Stentor, the court wizard of solitude, is a vampire who has been advising the Jarl's court for over a century. Most members of the court know or suspect her nature and have quietly accepted it because she is simply too valuable to remove. Her knowledge of Nordic politics spans multiple reigns, multiple crises, multiple events that everyone else knows only through the distortions of recorded history. She feeds ethically by the standards she has established for herself, small amounts from willing donors who receive favors or protection in exchange. She is not malevolent. She is a predator who chose to build her life inside civilization rather than against it, who has spent more than a century making herself genuinely useful to the people she lives among. Whether that represents redemption, adaptation, or simply the long patience of a being who knows it will outlast every human concern it encounters is a question worth sitting with. Fact 82. The Thieves' Guild uses a system of symbols called shadow marks carved into buildings and surfaces throughout Skyrim. These marks communicate information between guild members, safe houses, valuable loot, danger, escape routes, locations already claimed. The system functions as a language invisible to non-members, who perceive the marks as random graffiti or weathering. The Guild's geographic reach, evidenced by the presence of shadow marks in every major city and many rural locations, suggests an organization with more genuine infrastructure than its current depleted state implies. The system was built during the Guild's prosperous years and outlasted that prosperity, quietly maintaining its function even as the organization that created it shrank and struggled. Fact 83. The Gildergreen, the sacred tree at the center of Whiterun's Wind District, died from devotion. For generations, worshippers of Kinnereth came to the tree and carved their prayers and blessings into its bark, each cut individually small but collectively devastating. The accumulated damage of centuries of reverence killed the tree their reverence was directed at. The quest to restore it forces a specific choice. Cut a branch from the Elder Gleam, the mother tree in a sacred grove to the northeast, or persuade its guardian to provide a sapling instead. The dead tree stands as a monument to the particular way that worship can become damage without anyone intending it, through multiplication of individually harmless acts across enough time. Fact 84. Galathil, the face sculptor in the Ragged Flagon in Riften, is a vampire. Her pale skin, red eyes, and certain dialogue hints confirm it to attentive players. The game never addresses this directly or offers an explanation. She provides facial reconstruction services to Thieves' Guild members and others who can pay, presumably with surgical precision that her condition may enhance. Her presence in the Guild's headquarters reflects the Guild's generally pragmatic approach to moral categories. She does quality work, she does not prey on Guild members, and what she is outside those parameters is not the Guild's concern. Section 11, Solstheim, Apocrypha, and the Dragonborn's Inheritance. The night is very quiet now, the kind of quiet that has texture to it, that is not the absence of sound so much as the presence of something else entirely. We have one more long journey to take before we rest, to Solstheim, to the place where the first Dragonborn waited in the dark for someone like you. Fact 85. Solstheim was once physically connected to the Skyrim mainland. Geological and lore evidence both support this. The island that appears on Skyrim's northeastern horizon was separated from the continent by the battle between Miraak and Vahlok the Jailer, two peak-tier magic users of the Merethic era, whose conflict was so energetically overwhelming that it literally reshaped the physical geography of the region. The strait that now separates Solstheim from the mainland is not a natural waterway, it is a scar. The permanent record of what happens when two beings of sufficient power stop caring about collateral damage. Fact 86. Miraak's name, in Dovazul, means allegiance guide, not betrayer, not first dragonborn, not world conqueror, allegiance guide. There is something in that name worth examining. A being whose nature is the shaping of loyalty, who spent millennia trapped in a library, collecting power that could only be fully realized if there were people to guide. He built a cult on Solstheim from his confinement in Apocrypha. He reached through dimensional barriers to compel labor from sleeping islanders. He was working, methodically, patiently, across thousands of years, toward a return that he was not entirely certain was possible. The Dragonborn DLC's climax is a confrontation between the last Dragonborn and the first, in Apocrypha, with Hermaeus Mora watching. Mora, who collects everything, has been waiting for this specific meeting. Either Miraak would free himself and become something difficult to control, or the last Dragonborn would defeat him and become Mora's new champion. Both outcomes serve Mora's interests. The game makes no secret of this. When the last Dragonborn walks away from Apocrypha, they are walking away as something Mora has claimed in one sense or another. The cycle repeats, with different participants. Fact 87. Stalrim, the unique ice-based material found on Solstheim, is considered sacred by the Skal people, who call it the crystallized tears of their gods. Harvesting it without permission is a spiritual violation in their cultural framework. The Thalmor's attempts to steal Stalrim knowledge from the Skal represent something the game frames carefully, not just resource extraction, but cultural appropriation at gunpoint. The attempt to take not just a material, but a meaning. The Skal's refusal to share this knowledge, even under torture, is presented as a principled act rather than simple stubbornness. The protection of something that is valuable precisely because of what it means, not just what it does. When the Dragonborn learns Stalrim crafting, it is framed as being entrusted with a secret, an act of genuine respect, following demonstrated trustworthiness. The game treats indigenous knowledge as something that requires permission rather than something that can simply be taken. This is unusual for a genre that typically structures player progression around taking whatever you find, and the contrast is worth noticing. Fact 88. The Skal village on Solstheim maintains a relationship with the natural world through something called the All-Maker, a spiritual framework fundamentally different from both the Nordic divine pantheon and the Daedric prince worship that dominates most of Tamriel's spiritual landscape. The All-Maker is not a deity in the conventional sense. It is the cycle of creation and return, the principle that everything that lives will return to the source from which it came, and that source is not empty but generative. The stones of the All-Maker, scattered across Solstheim, are fotzi for this relationship, places where the generative principle is particularly present. Miraak's corruption of these stones, compelling Solstheim's inhabitants to work on constructions around them in a mindless trance, is a spiritual desecration as much as a physical one. He is not just controlling people. He is using the places most sacred to their relationship with the world as instruments of his own ambition, which is the kind of violation that is harder to repair than physical damage. Fact 89. Arvak, the spectral horse available in the Soul Cairn, is the best mount in the game by most functional measures. He can be summoned anywhere, cannot die permanently, and glows with a blue-purple light that makes navigation easier at night. Finding him requires searching the Soul Cairn for his skull and fulfilling a Shade's request to be reunited with his lost companion. The Shade is not aggressive, it is simply lost and grieving, and the request is not for power or revenge, but for reunion with something it loved. The reward for showing basic kindness to a lost soul is a horse that outlasts everything. The game occasionally does this, buries the best outcomes not behind combat prowess or strategic cleverness, but behind the simple willingness to notice what something needs and provide it without being asked. Fact 90. The Black Books of Apocrypha. Each contain power and each carry a price. They are objects from Hermaeus Mora's realm that have found their way into the mortal world, left or placed or allowed to drift to places where the curious would find them. Each one contains genuine knowledge and genuine capability. Each one also binds its reader more deeply to Mora's sphere, to the library that never ends, to the prince who never stops collecting. Miraak's extended time in Apocrypha made him one of the most powerful beings in Tamriel's fourth era. Millennia of access to the greatest library ever assembled, guided by a patron who wanted him powerful enough to be useful. The problem was that the same access that made him powerful kept him contained. Knowledge in Apocrypha is not free. It is currency in a transaction where Mora always sets the exchange rate. Fact 91. The Dragonborn DLC adds shouts that exist nowhere in base Skyrim. Dragon Aspect, Cyclone, Battle Fury, and Bend Will. These are Miraak's shouts, or rather, shouts that were known during the height of Miraak's power and subsequently lost with his disappearance. Their preservation in Solstime's All-Maker Stone network, and in Apocrypha, represents knowledge that survived the Dragon War's aftermath in a form the Greybeards never had access to. Bend Will, in particular, the shout that can compel obedience from any being, including dragons, raises philosophical questions the game asks but does not answer. If mortals can compel sentient beings to obey through the Thu'um, what distinguishes that from the draconic dominance it was used to fight? The Greybeards would categorize Bend Will as a violation of the Way of the Voice. Miraak had no such philosophical restrictions. His legacy is what the Thu'um looks like when you take its power without its ethics. Fact 92. Naloth, the Telvanni wizard encountered in the Dragonborn DLC, appears middle-aged but is several centuries old. Telvanni mages extend their lifespans through magical means while maintaining physical vitality, and Neloth has been a powerful wizard longer than most current Nordic family lines have existed as distinct lineages. His casual dismissal of most things mortal concerns, his willingness to treat research subjects as expendable, his genuine inability to assign meaningful weight to individual deaths, comes not from cruelty but from a temporal perspective that most mortals cannot access. After enough centuries, events that feel catastrophic to the people inside them look from the outside like weather patterns. They come and they go. The interesting ones deserve study. The rest are just noise. He is genuinely useful and genuinely dangerous for the same reason. He will do whatever the research requires. Fact 93. The Ebony Warrior, who approaches the Dragonborn at level 80 and requests an honorable death in combat, is not suicidal in any conventional sense. He is operating within the internal logic of a warrior culture that assigns specific meaning to how death arrives. He has achieved everything possible. He has become powerful enough that there is no natural death available to him. Not from age, not from disease, not from any enemy the world can easily produce. He wants to go to Sovngarde, and Sovngarde requires a death in battle, which requires a worthy opponent, which he can no longer find except in one place. He is asking the Dragonborn to complete his life's work by ending it appropriately. The request is respectful. The combat he offers is genuinely challenging. When you defeat him, you give him exactly what he asked for. Whether that is murder or mercy depends entirely on whether you accept the framework that makes his request coherent. Section 12. Endings, Mysteries, and the Dragonborn's Uncertain Fate. We are close now. The facts are running toward their end, as all things do, but they end gently, and the quiet is waiting for you on the other side. Fact 94. The Alduin's Wall in Skyhaven Temple depicts the entire arc of the Dragonborn's destiny before it happens. The Akaviri built this monument after helping defeat Alduin in the ancient era, recording not just the historical defeat, but the prophesied future return and confrontation. Everything shown on the wall occurs during the main quest line. The Blades use this prophecy to maintain their purpose across centuries without dragons to hunt or Dragonborn to serve. When Alduin returned and the last Dragonborn appeared, the wall validated everything they had been holding on to. Prophecy carved in stone thousands of years ago, playing out exactly as depicted. Whether this represents genuine prescience or the self-fulfilling nature of stories powerful enough to shape the people who believe them is a question the wall itself does not answer. Fact 95. The Blades were originally not from Tamriel. They came from Akavir, a mysterious continent across the eastern sea from Tamriel, about which very little is known, and most of that is contradictory. The Akaviri invaded Tamriel specifically to destroy dragons, whose presence on the continent was apparently known to them from their homeland. Their invasion failed politically, but succeeded in helping end draconic dominance. Some Akaviri remained, eventually becoming the Emperor's bodyguards and intelligence network, the Blades. Their fighting style, their armor design, their organizational traditions all carry Akaviri elements that were never fully absorbed into Tamrielic culture. They are foreigners who became foundational to the Empire's function, outsiders who shaped an institution from the inside and remain shaped by where they came from. Fact 96. Vigilance, the war dog that Banning sells outside Markarth, can be purchased and used as a companion. He is one of the few animal companions in the game who will follow the Dragonborn indefinitely. Unlike Miko, the dog found near a dead Nord's campfire in Hjalmarch, who will follow you if you simply approach him, Vigilance requires payment. 1,500 gold. Which raises the question of why you would spend 1,500 gold on a dog when Miko is available for nothing, and the answer is that Vigilance is trained, that the 1,500 gold is for the work of making him what he is, and that Miko comes to you already missing something important, and carrying loss in ways that make him a different kind of companion. Fact 97. The Ogma Infinium, Hermaeus Mora's most significant gift artifact, does not simply teach skills. According to the lore embedded in the object, reading it fundamentally rewrites the reader at a biological and spiritual level, forcibly implanting knowledge by overwriting the neural and soul-level architecture that would normally be used for slower learning. You gain decades of capability instantly. You also lose the self that would have acquired those capabilities through experience. The person who reads the Infinium and the person who closes it are not the same person. The new one has better skills. The old one is simply gone, replaced without ceremony by whatever the book needed to make room for. Mora does not give knowledge freely. He trades current identity for expanded capability. Each reader becomes, in some small way, his. Fact 98. The College of Winterhold's Great Collapse, the event where most of Winterhold fell into the sea, occurred in 4E122, nearly 80 years before the events of the game. The college survived. The city around it did not. Nords of the area have blamed the college ever since, though no evidence connects the college's activities to the disaster. The actual cause of the collapse appears to have been connected to the Oblivion Crisis's after effects. Specifically, a magical catastrophe at a scale that the college was not responsible for, but could not prevent. The college survives in the Fourth Era as a smaller, more isolated version of what it was in previous eras, distrusted by the Nords, physically separated from the ruined city by the same event everyone wrongly blames it for. It continues its work in a building that hangs over the collapse it supposedly caused, carrying a reputation built entirely on proximity to a disaster it was powerless to stop. Fact 99. The Augur of Dunlane, the magical entity trapped in the college's lower levels, was once a student named Dunlane who experimented with powers beyond his understanding and was transformed into pure magical energy by the accident. He exists now as a aware consciousness without a physical form, capable of perception and communication, but unable to leave his chamber. The college maintains him partly as a resource. He accumulated knowledge during his transformed state that makes him useful for divination and magical research, and partly as a warning. His advice comes at the cost of his existence as a cautionary tale. The warning goes largely unheeded, because the College of Winterhold's entire institutional history is a sequence of people following their curiosity past the point of safety. Dunlane just got there first and became the monument. Fact 100. Shalador's Maze, the labyrinthian that appears in the college questline, was originally Bromjunar, the administrative capital of the dragon cult's theocracy during the Merethic era. The highest-ranking dragon priests gathered there to govern, to settle territorial disputes between draconic domains, to administer an empire that covered all of ancient Skyrim. When the Dragon War ended and the dragon cult fell, Bromjunar's significance vanished with it. The city that had been the seat of an empire became ruins. The ruins acquired a new name that described their confusing layout rather than their former glory. And inside those ruins, behind the puzzle corridors that modern adventurers navigate for quest objectives, are the preserved masks of 8 dragon priests, arranged on busts in a room that was once used for ceremonies of genuine civilizational weight. The scale of the ruins hints at what the cult was. The silence of the place says everything about how completely it ended. Fact 101. Ulfric Stormcloak killed High King Torrig using the Thuum in a duel that was meant to test martial prowess. The voice knocked Torrig off his feet and left him incapacitated, at which point Ulfric killed him with a sword. Traditional Nordic duels are supposed to test strength and skill. Ulfric used supernatural reality manipulation against a man who had no supernatural capabilities and no defense against them. Whether this constitutes clever use of available tools or a fundamental betrayal of the duel's purpose depends on which tradition you consider more binding: the right to use all available capabilities in combat, or the implicit covenant that a martial test is meant to test martial capability rather than inherent magical gift. The Civil War began partly because a significant portion of Skyrim found Ulfric's answer to that question unsatisfactory. Fact 102. Paarthurnax's willingness to be killed, to allow the Dragonborn to choose his death in response to the Blade's demands, represents a particular kind of integrity. He does not flee. He does not fight. He acknowledges that his crimes during the Dragon War were real, and that the Blade's anger is not without foundation. He makes the argument for his own worth, not by denying what he was, but by pointing to what he has become and asking whether transformation carries weight. And then he accepts whatever you decide. He asks you to use whatever framework you have for measuring these things. He trusts you with the decision, and the fact that you have to make it, rather than having it made for you, is the game's way of insisting that some questions are genuinely yours to answer. Fact 103. The companion's Ysgramor, whose 500 changed Nordic civilization, was known specifically as a scholar as well as a warrior. He was the first human to write in the Elven script, adapting it for the Nordic language. He wrote what became the foundational texts of Nordic history. The man responsible for the genocide of the Snow Elves was also the man who gave the Nords their written language. Histories are complicated in that way. The people who built are often also the people who destroyed, and the legacy runs in both directions simultaneously. Fact 104. Helgen, the town where the game begins, was once a thriving settlement. By the time the Dragonborn passes through it, it has already been reduced to ash by Alduin's first attack in the current era. The dragon's return begins with destruction. The world the Dragonborn is born into is already post-catastrophe, already shorter by one settlement, already carrying its first real casualty of the new draconic threat. Every story about the Civil War and the politics of Skyrim happens in the shadow of this first event, though most of it proceeds as though the shadow is not there. Fact 105. The throat of the world is 7,000 steps from the bottom to the top. Each stone step was carved individually and has been worn by thousands of pilgrims over thousands of years. The path exists because people believed it was worth walking. The Greybeards did not build the path to the top of their mountain. They allowed the path to exist because people kept coming. There is a kind of humility in that. The path was not their gift. It was made by everyone who decided that whatever was at the top was worth the climb. Fact 106. The Penitus Oculatus, the Empire's intelligence agency and bodyguard organization in Skyrim's era, replaced the Blades following the Great War and the White Gold Concordat. Where the Blades were dragon hunters with ancient traditions and quasi-mystical connections to the Dragonborn emperors, the Penitus Oculatus are conventional intelligence operatives and personal protection agents, technically proficient, institutionally loyal, cosmologically unremarkable. The replacement of one with the other represents the Empire's post-war transformation, from a civilization with divine mandate and mystical legitimacy to one running on administrative competence and political compromise. Both can work. They are different kinds of thing. Fact 107. Serana's father, Lord Harkon, has lived long enough to develop a worldview structured entirely around a vampire's fundamental priorities. The sun is an obstacle. Mortality is a disease. The point of immortality is to demonstrate the superiority of the condition. By the time the Dragonborn encounters him, he has been undead long enough that the baseline assumptions of human existence have been re-examined and mostly discarded. His plan to blot out the sun, using Oriel's bow and his daughter's prophesied blood, is not a villain's scheme in the cartoonish sense. It is the logical endpoint of a perspective that has had centuries to fully develop and calcify. He is what happens when you live long enough to optimize around a single value without anything to interrupt the optimization. Fact 108. Potema, the Wolf Queen of Solitude, died centuries before Skyrim's events, but came close to resurrection during the Fourth Era through cult worship. Potema was one of Skyrim's most significant historical villains, a necromancer and political schemer who allied with Daedric forces during her reign and triggered a succession crisis that destabilized the Empire for decades. Her spirit, maintained by ongoing worship and ritual, was strong enough to influence the living from beyond death, to whisper to cultists, to direct complex preparations for her own return. The Dragonborn disrupts the resurrection ritual. Whether her spirit was genuinely dispersed or merely delayed is a question the game leaves open. Powerful wills do not simply stop wanting things because they have been interrupted. Fact 109. The Dragon Break in the First Era, an event in which the timeline fractured into multiple simultaneous, contradictory possibilities, has left certain historical events genuinely unresolvable. The reign of the Riemann dynasty contains periods where multiple contradictory accounts are all simultaneously accurate, because the events happened in a time when causality itself was not functioning normally. Elder Scrolls lore treats this not as a writing inconsistency to be resolved, but as a feature of the world's history, evidence that time in Tamriel is a fragile structure, subject to damage from sufficiently powerful acts of will. The Dragonborn's use of the Elder Scroll to witness Alduin's original banishment is a small, controlled version of the kind of temporal manipulation that, performed at larger scale, produced events that cannot be narrated in sequential order because they did not happen in sequential order. Fact 110. The children of Skyrim cannot be harmed, not mechanically, not in the game's systems. They are flagged essential and cannot be killed. This is a game design decision, not a lore decision, but it has an interesting effect. It makes children the safest beings in a world that is otherwise extraordinarily dangerous. Dragons attack cities, civil wars devastate the countryside, ancient evil wakes regularly, and the children of Skyrim move through all of this unharmed because the world was designed to protect them even when it was designed to threaten everything else. It is, in its way, the smallest and most complete utopia in the game. Fact 111. Sovngarde is not universally available to Nords. The requirement for entry is an honorable death, dying in a manner that fits the Nordic cultural framework for what constitutes a worthy end. Warriors who die in battle, leaders who die defending their people, those who sacrifice themselves for something beyond personal survival. The criteria are cultural and specific. Warriors who die of old age in their beds, who were weak, who fled battles. These are not automatically guaranteed entry. Nords who carry the beast blood of lycanthropy have their souls claimed by the wolf spirit on death, rather than released to Sovngarde. The Nordic afterlife is not universal or automatic. It is earned by a specific culture's definition of what earning means. Fact 112. The Daedric princes cannot be killed. They can be banished from the mortal plane, driven back to their own realms, weakened temporarily. But the planes of oblivion exist as long as the principles they embody exist, and those principles are fundamental enough to the structure of reality that eliminating them entirely would require eliminating reality itself. Mehrunes Dagon was defeated in the Oblivion Crisis. He is still out there in the Deadlands. Molag Bal's plans in the Second Era did not succeed. He is still in Cold Harbor. The Dragonborn can interfere with their plans in the mortal world, can resist them, can defeat their mortal agents and even their avatars. But the Daedric princes themselves are, in the most literal sense, beyond reach. Fact 113. The Companions' transformation from a genocide force into an honorable mercenary organization took thousands of years and is still ongoing. There is no moment in the historical record where the organization said, "We were wrong, let us be something else." The change was gradual, generational, transmitted through shifting traditions and the slow drift of institutional priorities. By Skyrim's Fourth Era, the Companions of Whiterun have so thoroughly reinvented themselves that the founding purpose is available only to those who read carefully enough. The Harbinger's seat, the warrior traditions, the emphasis on individual honor, these connect backward to the original 500, but they have been refracted through so many generations of use that the original shape is barely visible in the current one. This is how institutions change, not through declarations, but through repetition, through each generation inheriting what was and deciding what to keep, through the accretion of choices that collectively become a different thing without any single choice being the decisive one. Fact 114. The lusty Argonian Maid, the notorious in-game book series found literally everywhere in Skyrim, in noble houses and bandit camps and ancient ruins, was written by a Morrowind character named Crassius Curio, who appeared in that game and was known for his particular literary interests. The fact that his work achieved continent-wide distribution and genuine popular appeal across 200 years and multiple political upheavals is, by the internal logic of the world, one of the more remarkable cultural success stories in Elder Scrolls history. More people know Crassius Curio's name in Skyrim's era through this book than through any of his political achievements. His literary legacy has outlasted his biography. This is a relatable experience that the game delivers via one of its most consistently absurd recurring jokes. Fact 115. The sleeping soldiers of the dragon cult are not simply undead. The Draugr who patrol ancient Nordic tombs are the reanimated bodies of dragon cult members who continued their service after death through a process connected to the draconic magic that permeated these burial sites. They are not mindless zombies executing simple patrol routines. Some of them retain enough of their original identity to use tactics, to wield specific weapons associated with their rank, to respond to the presence of the Thu'um with something closer to recognition than simple aggression. The highest-ranking Draugr Deathlords are fighting you with thousands of years of martial memory. They have not forgotten everything. They have only forgotten the parts that required a living mind to hold. Fact 116. Hermaeus Mora's realm is called Apocrypha, from the Greek apokryphos, meaning hidden or secret. It is a name that carries the meaning of its content into its title. The realm of hidden knowledge is called, literally, the hidden. Everything in it is simultaneously the most available and the most dangerous information in existence, preserved in books that cover every surface and horizon, readable by anyone brave enough to enter and mad enough to trust the experience. The infinite library is the perfect metaphor for a prince whose nature is knowledge. Everything you want to know is here, and you only pay for it once you have read far enough to understand what the price actually is. Fact 117. The Companion's beast blood, the lycanthropy shared among the Circle's members, originally came from the Glenmoral Witches, a coven of hagravens and Falkreath Hold who struck an ancient deal with the organization. The nature of that deal is left deliberately vague. The witches gave the Circle the ability to transform into werewolves. What they received in exchange is not recorded in any document available in the game. Kodlak's research into a cure brought him into conflict with this original arrangement. And the witches who hold the cure are the same witches who provided the curse. The symmetry is not accidental. Fact 118. The Headless Horseman's pattern can be traced by dedicated players. He appears at specific locations across Skyrim's roads at night and follows consistent routes toward Hamvir's Rest. Players who have mapped his routes have found that he appears at multiple points across the map, suggesting he covers significant distance during the game's night cycle. He never acknowledges the player, he never deviates from his path. He simply moves through the dark, night after night, repeating a journey that ended for him sometime the game does not specify, toward a grave that cannot give him anything except the proximity to the place where something was finished. Fact 119. Bard's college students are taught a specific version of Nordic history that differs in significant ways from both the written records in the College of Winterhold and the oral traditions maintained by the Greybeards. The version preserved in Bardic tradition emphasizes cultural continuity, heroic narrative, and the specific deeds of specific Nords, in ways that serve the function of national myth even when they conflict with more precise historical records. This is not unique to Skyrim. All civilizations maintain multiple versions of their history simultaneously, official and unofficial, scholarly and popular, and the version that survives in the widest circulation is usually not the most accurate one. It is the most useful one. Fact 120. The Eye of Magnus, the artifact discovered beneath Sarthal during the College of Winterhold quest line, does not fit any known category of magical object. It is older than conventional Elder Scrolls magic categories. Some scholars believe it is a remnant from a previous kalpa, a previous cycle of the universe, a world that ended before this one began and left this fragment behind, the way water leaves rings on a table long after the glass is gone. The Sijic Order, the oldest magical organization in Tamriel, considers it dangerous enough to remove from all mortal access entirely when they retrieve it, not to study, not to contain, to remove. Their intervention signals that whatever the eye is, the most ancient and careful magical minds on the continent have decided that no one should have it. The artifact that started a minor apocalypse at Skyrim's premier magical institution is now somewhere beyond reach, which is probably where it should have been all along. Fact 121. The Staff of Magnus was designed by Magnus himself, the god of magic, as a tool for controlling the very flow of magical energy in the world. In ancient times, when Magnus was still present in Mundus before his departure, this staff helped him shape how magic would function in the physical realm, what it could do, where it could flow, what rules it would follow. In the wrong hands, combined with the Eye of Magnus, it could theoretically rewrite the fundamental rules of how magic operates in Tamriel. The Thalmor sought it for precisely this reason. Control over how magic functions is control over every mage, every enchanter, every individual in the world who depends on the magical systems being stable. The College of Winterhold questline's ultimate prize is not the staff itself, but the prevention of that capability falling to people who would use it to end the academic freedom of magic entirely. Fact 122. Meridia's beacon, which the player can encounter randomly in various locations before the associated quest triggers, calls out when the player passes near it. The voice is immediate, demanding, and completely unconcerned with the player's schedule or preferences. This is accurate to Meridia's characterization throughout. She is not a patron who asks. She is a principal that instructs. Her genuine care for the mortal world, her real hatred of undeath, her authentic investment in light and life, does not translate into courtesy because principals do not do courtesy. They simply are. The discomfort players often feel about Meridia comes from encountering genuine care expressed through something that feels like command. Both things are true simultaneously. Fact 123. The companions founding 500 were individually named. Their deeds were recorded in Nordic saga. They were not an anonymous army, but 500 specific heroes, each with their own history, their own accomplishments, their own contributions to the settlement of Skyrim. Thousands of years later, those individual stories have been mostly lost, compressed into the collective noun, remembered as a unit rather than as 500 separate lives. The Harbinger's title traces back directly to those original 500. The modern companions maintain traditions whose individual original meanings have faded. They are the echo of an echo, and the song that produced them is too old now to hear clearly. Fact 124. Dwemer Centurions, the largest automaton enemies in Skyrim's Dwemer ruins, operate through a steam pressure system that builds charge over time. This is not just a combat mechanic. It reflects genuine engineering logic. The Centurion maintains lower power consumption during patrol and ramps up pressure when a threat is detected, achieving peak output precisely when maximum output is required. The Dwemer designed their security systems to manage resources efficiently. Thousands of years later, that efficiency is still functioning as intended. The machine knows when to rest and when to escalate. The people who built it cannot be asked whether this was intentional, but the evidence suggests it was. Fact 125. The Dunmer city of Blacklight in Morrowind became a haven for many of the Dunmer who did not flee to Skyrim following Red Mountain's eruption. The choice of where to go after a civilizational catastrophe, whether to seek the nearest safety or to try to rebuild, produced the cultural split visible in Skyrim's Grey Quarter. The Dunmer and Windhelm are not the whole of the Dunmer diaspora. They are the ones who chose proximity, who went to the closest place that would take them even partially. Whether that choice was better or worse than the alternative depends on which century you are examining and what you value most. Fact 126. Otar the Mad, one of the dragon priests whose mask is available in Skyrim, was imprisoned in Ragnvald by two other named Draugr, Otar himself being mad but powerful, requiring a specific seal to contain. The decision to imprison him rather than kill him suggests that either he could not be killed by conventional means, or that someone believed the power he represented was worth preserving, even at the cost of maintaining a functional prison for it. Ragnvald is still functional as a prison when the Dragonborn arrives. The two Draugr who sealed him are still at their posts. The system built to contain Otar is still working. The people who maintained it are dead, but still working. Fact 127. The Psijic Order lives on an island, Artium, that sometimes disappears from the world entirely, removes itself from normal space-time, taking up residence somewhere adjacent to Tamriel's physical reality, but not fully in it. This makes the Order's membership effectively unreachable to any external force that might want to interfere with them. When the Psijics intervene in the mortal world, as they do during the College of Winterhold questline, it represents a significant enough threat to cosmic stability that they have decided the disruption of their non-presence is justified. Their magic, including the ability to freeze time and walk through stopped moments, makes the College of Winterhold's most impressive mages look like promising students. They have been studying magic since before the concept of organized magical study existed elsewhere. Fact 128. The goats of Skyrim are property of specific farms and will generate revenue for those farms if left alone. The game's economic simulation is thorough enough that animal husbandry has persistent material consequences. Players who casually kill goats on the road are engaging in a small act of economic disruption, not significant enough to trigger consequences, but real enough to be modeled. The world of Skyrim does not simply generate new goats. The goats that exist are specific animals in specific relationships with specific owners, and their absence would matter to those owners in ways that persist through the game's economic systems, even if nobody ever comments on it. Fact 129. The Sarthal excavation, where the College of Winterhold sends its new students in the first college quest, is digging through the ruins of the oldest human settlement in Skyrim. Sayarthal was built by the first generation of Atmorans to settle in the province, and it was destroyed in the Night of Tears. The Snow Elf attack that sent Isgramr back to Atmora to gather his 500. The students who dig through its ruins are excavating the foundation event of Nordic civilization, handling artifacts from a moment that changed everything about who the Nords are and how they came to occupy the land they now call home. The college presents it as an archaeological exercise. What they are actually asking students to do is reach their hands into the oldest wound in Nordic history and bring out whatever they find. Fact 130. The giant mournful vigil near Broken Tower Redoubt, the one standing over his dead mammoth, has a specific respawn behavior. If the giant is killed, a new giant eventually appears at the same location, behaving identically, mourning the same mammoth. The game does not explain this. It might represent a different giant finding the same body. It might be the same giant, in the Elder Scrolls' understanding of death and return. It might simply be a consequence of the game's respawn mechanics, producing an interaction that was never fully intended. Whatever its cause, the repetition produces something affecting. The image of grief recurring at the same coordinates, the same body, the same position of helpless standing over, as if the world keeps trying to work through something it cannot resolve. Fact 131. The Companion's monthly moot at Whiterun allows any Nord with relevant standing to address the gathered warriors. This tradition connects to the ancient Nordic Thing system, the assembly tradition common to real-world Norse and Germanic cultures in which disputes were publicly aired and communally adjudicated. The Companion's formal decision-making processes preserve these assembly structures in a form that has outlasted the political institutions that originally gave them context. The Companions inherited the form without necessarily understanding all of its original function, and now the form carries meaning through its own long use rather than through its institutional origins. Fact 132. Whiterun's Cloud District is consistently referenced as being above the Wind District, which is above the Market District, which reflects a genuine stratification of Whiterun's society mapped onto the city's physical topology. The higher you live in Whiterun, the higher your social standing. The Companions in Jorrvaskr occupy the Wind District but maintain independence from Whiterun's governance. The Jarl in Dragon's Reach sits at the literal top of the city. The market is at the bottom, where the most people are and where the least structural power resides. Cities do this. They map hierarchy onto geography so that the social order becomes visible in the skyline. Whiterun does it unselfconsciously enough that it reads as natural rather than arranged. Fact 133. The College of Winterhold has survived in spite of Skyrim, not because of it. Nordic culture is broadly hostile to formal magical practice, viewing it with suspicion that shades regularly into active antagonism. The Greybeards represent the acceptable face of voice magic, devotion, restraint, service to divine will. The college represents the unacceptable face, academic curiosity, magical experimentation, power without obvious devotion. The college exists at the far northern edge of the map, isolated, accessible only by crossing a narrow bridge, surrounded by a city that blames it for a catastrophe it probably did not cause. It persists because the people inside it believe what they are doing matters enough to do in hostile conditions. That is not an institutional survival strategy. That is just stubbornness in service of something worth being stubborn about. Fact 134. Breezehome, the first house available for purchases in Skyrim, sits in Whiterun near the Market District. It is a practical house. Nothing remarkable about it structurally. A main room, a kitchen space, a bedroom, storage for the things you accumulate. What makes it significant is the way it functions as the player's first permanent anchor in the world. Before Breezehome, everything is transit. After it, there is somewhere to put down what you are carrying. The bed provides the actual sleep bonus, but the house provides something the bed alone does not. The sense that there is a place you belong to in a world that is otherwise entirely about motion. Fact 135. Shadowmere, the Dark Brotherhood's horse, has been a fixture of the Elder Scrolls series since Oblivion. She is effectively immortal. If killed, she respawns at the nearest body of water. She has significantly more health than any other horse in the game, and will fight alongside you. She has red eyes and moves through the world with a quality of presence that other horses lack. The game does not explain what she is exactly, and the Dark Brotherhood's literature does not address her nature directly. She has been in service to the Brotherhood and its predecessors long enough that her origins predate reliable records. Some things simply exist in the Elder Scrolls universe without requiring explanation. Fact 136. The Galder Amulet Quest, Forbidden Legend, is one of the longest and most complex side quests in the game, requiring you to travel to 3 separate dungeons across Skyrim, defeat 3 different Galder brothers who murdered their father for his pure, and reassemble the amulet fragments at the original tomb. The brothers killed their father, Archmage Galdur, for the power his amulet represented. Their mother cursed them to never rest. They have been fighting each other and everyone else from their separate crypts for over 2,000 years, hostile, preserved in undeath by a maternal curse, unable to complete or resolve the conflict that split them. When the Dragonborn finally ends all 3 and reassembles the amulet, it does not feel primarily like a reward. It feels like the conclusion of a grief that needed to be finished before anyone involved could rest. Fact 137. The Forgotten Realm, Meridia's pocket dimension, accessible through Kilkreath Temple, is a space that exists entirely to provide a clean, flat arena for the conflict she has asked you to conduct on her behalf. It is not a place in the usual sense. It has no history, no ecology, no population beyond the enemies that inhabit it. It is a purpose-built extension of a divine will, created specifically to house the problem Meridia wants solved. Walking through it, you are walking through a room in a building that exists inside a mind. The architecture is the prince's intention made spatial. This is, according to the lore, how Daedric planes always work. Each realm a physical manifestation of its ruler's nature. Meridia's realm is clean, bright, and functional, which tells you exactly what she values and cares about, and also exactly what she does not. Fact 138. Thalmor soldiers patrol the roads of Skyrim. They have a list of people they are looking for, and if you are carrying certain items or have certain affiliations, they will stop you and demand an accounting. This is normalized and accepted by most of Skyrim's population as simply a feature of the current political landscape, the consequence of the White Gold Concordat, the price of imperial survival in the aftermath of the Great War. Nobody is happy about it. Nobody who is not Thalmor thinks it is right. But the people with the power to change it have decided, for now, that the cost of the change is higher than the cost of the status. This is how normalized injustice functions, not through universal acceptance, but through universal calculation that the alternative is worse. Fact. 139. The words of power carved into Skyrim's word walls are not uniform. Each wall carries a specific shout word connected to a specific event at that location, usually a battle between a dragon and one or more ancient Nords significant enough to be commemorated in stone. The distribution of word walls across Skyrim maps the geography of the Dragon War, each wall a monument to a place where mortals proved that draconic dominance was not absolute. Most Nords in the Fourth Era walk past these walls without being able to read them. The dragon language that would make the inscriptions meaningful has been forgotten by everyone except the Greybeards, and whoever happens to have the innate draconic blood necessary to absorb words through proximity. The history of the Dragon War is written on rocks throughout the province. Most people cannot read it. The Dragonborn can, which makes the Dragonborn, in a sense, the only person currently alive who has full access to a history written specifically to be remembered. Fact 140. Delphine's paranoia, which makes her difficult and demanding as a companion and organizer of the Reformed Blades, is the paranoia of someone who survived a systematic extermination campaign. The Thalmor hunted Blades after the Great War with methodical thoroughness. Delphine watched her order be destroyed piece by piece, watched colleagues she had known for years simply disappear, learned that the people hunting them were very good at their work and very patient about doing it. She survived by becoming harder to find than they were good at finding. Her false identities, her attic hideouts, her willingness to distrust everyone, these are not personality flaws. They are survival techniques that worked, proven by the fact that she is still alive when almost everyone else from her order is not. The difficulty of working with her is the direct consequence of the price she paid to be available to work with at all. Fact 141. The Skyrim map is not to scale. The province is described in lore as covering approximately 105,000 square miles, larger than the entirety of Great Britain. The playable map represents a fraction of this, compressed to the point where walking from Solitude to Riften takes perhaps 30 minutes of real time. This compression is necessary for playability, but it means that everything the player experiences is an abstraction of a larger and more dangerous world. The distances between safe settlements in the actual province would be vast. The wilderness would be genuinely difficult to cross in single journeys. The dragons returning to a world of this scale would be a catastrophe far more overwhelming than the game can represent in its compressed geography. What the game shows you is a window. The world behind the window is much larger. Fact 142. The Forsworn Briarheart, a specific category of Forsworn warrior, has had their natural heart removed and replaced with a briar heart, a magical plant-based organ. This transformation is performed by Hagraven intermediaries and grants the warrior significantly enhanced capabilities, effectively making them a type of undead while preserving enough physical function to fight. The Briarheart warriors are visible as such. You can see the Briarheart in the chest cavity if you have the right vantage point. Removing it kills them instantly. The transformation is irreversible and represents the outer edge of the sacrifices the Forsworn are willing to make in service of reclaiming their homeland. There is no moderate position here. The Briarheart warriors have gone past any point where accommodation with the status quo is possible. Fact 143. Skyrim's cheese. The abundance of cheese throughout the province, in barrels, on tables, in ancient ruins, in bandit camps, in situations where cheese is conspicuous by the ordinariness of its presence, reflects actual historical reality rather than game design absurdity. Cheese was a primary food preservation technology in pre-refrigeration cultures. For a cold province with significant pastoral economy, cheese production would have been a major industry. The wheels represent portable, shelf-stable, nutritionally dense food that travels well and keeps indefinitely when properly aged. Cheese was legitimate cargo, legitimate trade goods, legitimate emergency rations. The fact that players spend considerable time launching cheese wheels off mountains with unrelenting force is not a design intention. The cheese is genuinely there for sensible historical reasons. Fact 144. The real-time day-night cycle of Skyrim affects NPC schedules, shop hours, patrol patterns, and atmospheric conditions. NPCs sleep, eat, and work at times consistent with their role and station. Merchants close their shops. Guards shift at specific intervals. The companions drink in the evenings. The college holds lectures in the afternoons. None of this exists specifically to serve the player. It exists to make the world feel like it functions according to its own internal logic, even when the player is not present to observe it. The world was running before you arrived. It will continue running after you leave a given location. You are a specific thing moving through a world that is also moving, not a cursor navigating a static background. Fact 145. Every named NPC in Skyrim has a schedule that runs continuously. This includes people you may never meet, merchants in cities you visit once, residents of holds you pass through, the various individuals who constitute the background population of Skyrim's social life. They wake up, work, eat, socialize, and sleep according to schedules built into the game's systems, whether the player observes them or not. The famous invisible bear in the forest, if there were one, would have a schedule. The world is fully imagined, even the parts you never see, even the lives you never intersect with. This is part of what makes it feel like a world rather than a game. Fact 146. Skooma, the narcotic derived from moon sugar, is illegal throughout most of Tamriel. The trade in it is a constant background presence in Skyrim. The drug is available, people are addicted to it, enforcement against it is inconsistent and largely ineffective. The skooma trade connects to the Khajiit caravans in ways the game makes available for players who ask the right questions. Rhys-Saad, who leads the most prominent Khajiit caravan, is involved in distribution. The addiction economics, the way that providing something people become dependent on, creates persistent commercial relationships and information leverage, are sketched in enough detail to be understood without being explicitly stated. Skyrim does this repeatedly, presents the shape of a system without narrating it, trusts the player to read the shape. Fact 147. The mountains of Skyrim are not randomly placed. They follow a deliberate geographic logic connected to the lore. The Jural Mountains form the southern border with Cyrodiil. The throat of the world sits at the geographic center of the province, the highest point, the spiritual axis. The Moesring Mountains on Solstheim mark the northern extremity of the archipelago. The mountains are not decoration. They are the structural bones of a specific geography with specific historical meaning: borders, sacred sites, defensive positions, the physical shape of the province's self-understanding. Fact 148. The blizzard conditions in Skyrim's more northern and elevated regions affect gameplay in ways beyond the visual. Visibility drops, sound changes. The player character's movement is subtly affected. This is not simply atmospheric. It is a representation of conditions that would kill you in the actual world, present in softened form in the game. The cold of Skyrim is a background presence throughout the experience, one of the ways the world presses back against the Dragonborn's passage through it. The land is not neutral. It has weather. It has preferences, expressed in ice and wind, and the specific way that snow sounds underfoot versus under hoof. Fact 149. There are several points in Skyrim's main quest where the story could theoretically proceed differently based on choices the Dragonborn makes. The Paarthurnax's decision is the most significant, a genuine fork that permanently closes one option or another. The game acknowledges this fork with unusual clarity, making both sides present their case fully before you commit. Most of Skyrim's moral complexity is presented as context rather than choice, available to find, not forced upon you. The Paarthurnax's decision is the moment when the game insists you take a position rather than simply understanding one is available. Fact 150. The speaking stones in Skyrim, the standing stones scattered across the province, predate Nordic settlement. They are ancient magical monuments whose function is preserved, but whose original creators are not definitively identified. The blessings they provide reflect categories of power that correspond roughly to the three guardian constellations in the Elder Scrolls cosmological system: the warrior, the mage, and the thief. The stones were there when the Atmarans arrived. They were there, presumably, before the snow elves who preceded the Atmarans. They are old in the way that the land itself is old, and their function persists regardless of what civilization is currently using them. Fact 151. The Night of Tears, the snow elf attack on Sarthal, was not a random act of ethnic hostility. Beneath Sarthal lay the Eye of Magnus, one of the most powerful magical artifacts in known history. The snow elves knew it was there. Their attack was targeted, a strike to reclaim or destroy an artifact they could not allow a growing human civilization to possess. The massacre of civilians was the method, not the goal. This does not excuse it. Nothing excuses it. But it changes the shape of the event from incomprehensible cruelty to comprehensible calculation. And comprehensible calculation done in service of catastrophic ends is, in many ways, more disturbing than incomprehensible cruelty. The Snow Elves made a choice. That choice produced the Night of Tears, which produced Ysgramor's revenge, which produced the near extinction of the Snow Elves themselves. The first link in that chain of consequences was an artifact buried under a city. Fact 152. Sovngarde, the Nordic afterlife, is accessible in the game during the main quest. It is a place of golden light and feasting halls, of warriors telling their stories across tables that never empty, of a sky that is always the kind of sky that comes after a long battle ends in survival. Alduin has been feeding on the souls there, preventing people from reaching the Hall of Valor, consuming them in the paths between death and rest. The Dragonborn who goes to Sovngarde to find him is walking into the afterlife as a living person, protected by the specific nature of their gift, in ways that would not apply to most mortals. To move through Sovngarde as a living being is to be briefly in the space where everyone you have ever fought alongside, everyone who died well, eventually arrives. It is one of the game's most affecting environments, and it is available precisely because the main quest requires going somewhere that should not be accessible and doing something there that only one specific kind of person can do. Fact 153. The dragon language has 24 words that the Dragonborn can learn in the course of the game. Each word is a piece of Dovazul, the language that is also reality. The full extent of Dovazul as a language is much larger than what the game teaches, and scholars at the Greybeards level have access to aspects of it that gameplay never reaches. The 24 words are a sample, a vocabulary sufficient to save the world, if used correctly, extracted from an alphabet that was old before the world was young. Fact 154. Lydia can die permanently. She is not an essential NPC. She is the first housecarl most players receive, the first companion many people travel with, the first follower who accompanies you into the dangerous early chapters of the main quest. And she can be killed by badly aimed fireballs, by the splash of your own unrelenting force, by a dragon breath that clips her position in a way you did not anticipate. There is no resurrection. No reload prompt, just absence where she was. The game has no formal mechanism for grieving this. You can simply note that she is gone and continue. Many players have, many have not, choosing instead to reload rather than carry forward with that particular consequence. Both responses are legitimate. The game allows both. What it does not do is make the loss not real. Fact 155. Phalion. The mage in Morthal can cure vampirism. He does this willingly and without moral judgment, for a fee, at a specific time and location. He is also a former Arcane University scholar, with a checkered past that the residents of Morthal regard with deep suspicion, and which has not been fully explained in the content available in the game. He is the only known person in Skyrim who can reliably remove vampirism. The capacity to reverse the most significant supernatural condition in the game rests with someone who lives in a swamp, whose past is murky, and who nobody entirely trusts. The Elder Scrolls is consistent about this. The most useful things are rarely where the most comfortable things are. Fact 156. The Karth Spire, the location of Skyhaven Temple, was guarded by the Forsworn at the time of the game's main quest. The temple holds Alduin's Wall. The Forsworn, the indigenous people of the Reach, fighting to reclaim their homeland, are guarding a site that happens to contain the most important archaeological record of the Dragonborn's destiny and the history of dragon fighting in Tamriel. They do not know this. They are protecting territory. The monument inside is incidental to their purposes. The irony is that the people whose land was taken by Nordic conquest are inadvertently protecting the resource that helps the Dragonborn, the instrument of Nordic tradition, understand and fulfill their destiny. History arranges these coincidences without apparent intention. Fact 157. The real-time nature of Skyrim's world means that if you stand completely still for hours, the world continues around you. NPCs complete their daily routines. Weather changes. The sun moves. Merchants open and close. The companions drink and spar and sleep. The dragons that should be respawning do. The world is not paused by the player's inaction. It continues, indifferent, maintaining the rhythms it was given, as worlds do. Fact 158. The moons of Nirn, Maser, and Secunda have phases that affect different systems in the game. The phases are not random, they follow a real calendar. Werewolf transformation is not mechanically linked to moon phases in Skyrim the way it is in some other fantasy traditions, but the moon's presence and their visual relationship to the sky of Nirn connects to deeper lore. The moons are, according to some theories, the remains of Lorcan, the dead god whose heart became Red Mountain, and whose physical body became these two celestial bodies watching over the world he made and was punished for making. Every full moon is Lorcan looking at Tamriel. Whether that look carries regret, satisfaction, or nothing at all, nobody still alive can say. Fact 159. The last Dragonborn's ultimate fate is deliberately left unresolved. No subsequent Elder Scrolls game has provided a canonical account of what happened to them after the events of Skyrim. This is consistent with how Bethesda has handled previous Elder Scrolls protagonists, but it lands differently with the Dragonborn because the connection to Hermaeus Mora, established in the Dragonborn DLC's conclusion, suggests a specific kind of continuation. The theory that the Dragonborn remains in Apocrypha, either willingly or not, as Mora's permanent champion, reading in the infinite library until time ends, has a specific quality of both beauty and dread to it. The most powerful mortal in the Fourth Era, in an infinite library surrounded by all knowledge, incapable of leaving. It would be a perfect ending for a being whose defining characteristic was the ability to absorb. A soul built to take in and take in and take in a place where there is always more to take in forever. Whether that is reward or punishment depends entirely on how you felt about the reading. Fact 160. Skyrim is still running, somewhere on servers and PCs and consoles across the world. The version of Skyrim that was released in 2011, the one that was patched and expanded and re-released and re-patched and expanded again, is running right now as you listen to this. Dragonborns are crossing the border into Helgen. Paarthurnax is meditating on the throat of the world. Jurgen Windcaller's 7-year meditation is somewhere in its middle. Alduin is eating souls in Sovngarde, unaware that someone is on their way to stop him. The giants are tending their mammoths. The morning giant is standing over his friend. Maik the liar is somewhere on a road, carrying his truth that is a lie, waiting to share it with whoever passes close enough to hear. Somewhere in that running world, a scholar found a book with 316,000 words of history and fiction and poetry and erotica and sat down by a fire in a cold inn and started reading. And outside the window, it was snowing, and they did not notice for a long time. And somewhere else in that same world, at the very summit of the highest mountain, embedded in a rock above the playable sky, a pickaxe waits, placed there by people who were working hard on something they loved and wanted to acknowledge the other thing they loved. It costs nothing to find. It does not require a quest. It is just there, at the top of the world, in a place you have to go slightly out of your way to reach. That, in the end, is Skyrim. Not the dragons, not the civil war, not the cosmic destiny or the ancient prophecy or the weight of a universe being held together by a very small number of people who happen to be in the right place at the right time. It is a pickaxe on a mountaintop, a giant in grief, a scholar reading by a fire, 1,000 stories running simultaneously in a world that keeps going even when you are not watching. You do not have to save it tonight. It will be there when you wake up. Rest now. If this helped you settle into the quiet, drop a like so the algorithm knows to keep sending people this direction, and subscribe so you never have to go looking for the next one. Leave a comment telling me what you want me to cover next. Whether that is another corner of Skyrim's lore, a deep dive into a different Elder Scrolls game entirely, or something else from the worlds of games and mythology that might make good company for a sleepless night. Until next time, sleep well, cozy nights. The fire is still going.